Natalie Cooper believed that meeting Tyler was the greatest success of her life. Because of inner fear, she did not even tell her best friends about the fact that she began a romantic relationship with the man she adored. When Tyler made her an offer to start a family, it seemed to the girl that she was ready to take off from incredible happiness. Natalie and the groom began preparations for the celebration, deciding to make it modest and elegant. The girl kept waiting for trouble, not believing that fate finally smiled on her. But everything developed calmly and smoothly. Tyler never tired of declaring his love and behaved impeccably. It was like a fairy tale, and the bride wished that happiness would not leave her. Only after Natalie believed in the reality of what was happening, she gathered her courage and invited her company to a long-loved cafe. She had to share her happiness with those closest to her. The news that Natalie was getting married in 3 weeks shocked her friends, who were sitting comfortably at a table on the summer veranda of the small cafe. "Well, you're secretive," fell out a slender blonde, looking like a photo model, but actually working as a sales clerk in a pet store. "We didn't even know you were seeing someone. And then out of the blue, your wedding is in a month." "Oh, Emily, I can't believe it myself sometimes." The bride excused herself embarrassedly, with sparks of happiness shining in her eyes. "Things with Tyler and I have been going so fast that I haven't had time to share it with any of you. I'd like to make up for it and have some quality time together. You know, if you don't mind, I want to have a bachelorette party before Rachel leaves for her fiancé, and I want it to be special and memorable for all of us." The girl with crimson hair smiled affectionately at Natalie. "Thank you for remembering me. Unfortunately, I won't be able to make it to your wedding, but no, I'll be there for you mentally. In general, weddings for me, as you know, have long ceased to be something new and festive. I don't get photographers invited to bachelorette parties very often." "Rachel, I'm not inviting you for pictures, I'm inviting you to have fun together," Natalie countered. Ashley, who had red hair that was twisted into 2 high buns and long, curvy locks framing her face, was enthusiastic. She swiped a graceful finger across the screen of her smartphone and handed it to Emily sitting next to her, urging both her and the rest of her friends to evaluate the idea. "Look, I propose we have a bachelorette party at the rooftop restaurant. Alex and I have been there, and it's the most dizzying experience. The food is a B-, but the ambience and views are fabulous. Rachel, as a photographer, you have to appreciate it." Rachel, who had just then gotten Ashley's smartphone in her hands, nodded, and she decided to follow up. "Well, Rachel, tell me this is just an awesome location." "Wow. Think of all the footage you could get with your equipment." Rachel handed the smartphone to the bride sitting next to her. But Natalie wasn't the least bit enthusiastic about the rooftop party idea. "The view is really stunning, but I think a rooftop restaurant is appropriate for a romantic date, for example, or a wedding anniversary celebration. The place will have everything you need. But honestly, for a bachelorette party, it's just boring as hell." "That's okay, we'll sit on the rooftop, admiring the city, singing along," Ashley grumbled resentfully, taking her smartphone from the bride. "Oh sure, you could go to some nightclub. Cocktails or champagne, guys, wild dancing till you drop. And that would be all well and good, but as I recall, you didn't even like such places when you were young. I want my bachelorette party to be very special. No cafe parties and no boyfriends. That option is definitely out," Natalie confirmed and added, "especially since it's fraught. If Tyler gets wind of the program for such a bachelorette party, there probably won't be a wedding either. He already thinks all the men around me are looking at me with too much interest as it is," Natalie said. "That's something to be wary of," Rachel worried. "If a man is jealous, you'll have a lot of trouble with him. I've experienced it to the full. I think even a greedy companion is better than a man of Othello's temper." On me, my jealous hand raised when I dared, talking on the phone with the customer, smiling. Can you imagine? He sat there waiting for me to talk to him, and as soon as I finished the conversation, immediately got a slap on the wrist for allegedly flirting with another man. I was so embarrassed, I even made excuses. I said that courtesy is part of my job. After all, who would go to take a photo with an unfriendly master? I tried to explain to my jealous boyfriend that the person I was talking to couldn't even see my smile, because we weren't communicating via video link. I made it worse. I should have just walked away, not wasted time. We dated for a month after that, but I was sick of being blamed for everything. Oh, it was such a love affair. Oh, Rachel, why are you scaring Natalie? Emily broke the heavy silence. She's got a lot on her mind right now, without the stories of your failed relationships. Besides, I warned you about your Othello right away. Remember, when you introduced him to us, it was obvious he was pathologically possessive. By the way, Natalie, will you introduce us to your fiancé? The bride shook her head uncertainly. Tyler probably won't have time. He's working especially hard right now, so he can have some sort of extraordinary vacation and honeymoon trip later. Well, at least tell me about him then, Rachel asked. I think we'll be able to infer that anyway. Ashley, quickly shrugging off her resentment over the rejected rooftop bachelorette party idea, joined in. At least tell me briefly how you met this Tyler, what he does, how you plan for the future. The casual seriousness with which Ashley said the phrase lightened the mood. And Natalie, laughing, began to tell her friends her love story. Tyler came to our bakery to order a birthday cake for his mom. As luck would have it, the receptionist wasn't too busy at the time. She was trying to resolve a conflict with a disgruntled customer, and of course she had no way to stop negotiations halfway through. I was sent. Anyway, Tyler and I sat over the order for almost an hour. I talked in detail about the toppings, decorations, and so on. He was flipping through the catalog, asking all sorts of questions. I even felt like there was some sympathy between us. Girls, I don't even know how to explain. But by this point I was already like under hypnosis of his gray eyes. Probably if he offered me to drop everything and go somewhere with him to the North Pole, I wouldn't even think twice. I would have jumped. I almost jumped for joy when Tyler asked me to write his personal phone number on my copy of the order form when I signed it. I complied without hesitation. I won't admit that I was expecting Tyler to call me, but I wasn't particularly counting on it. It was obvious we were from different worlds. I talked myself into thinking it was pointless to expect Tyler to call, but I waited. And knowing his first and last name, I had no trouble finding him on social media. But his account was private. I just admired his picture, hesitant to ask to be his friend. That's why you were so sad, pensive, waiting for a call. And he still hasn't called, Emily asked. And Rachel, shaking out her crimson-colored strands, confidently declared, "Girls, here's the thing to remember. If a man compliments you, he literally falls in love with you, gets encouraging, and disappears. It's not that you're not good enough. It's just that there was a specimen applying the techniques of the most primitive pickup. According to the idea of these poorly made catchers, we girls are supposed to be bored, to suffer. And when His Majesty deigns to appear, we're supposed to rejoice." "No, Rachel," the bride objected vehemently. "My Tyler is not one of those. His order form, as we later found out, turned out to be messed up. Tyler's mom was on vacation at the spa. She'd been divorced from her husband for years, and her dog, Shoelace, was staying with Tyler because it was inconvenient for him to get to work from his mom's apartment. Anyway, either out of boredom or because the form smelled good, Lacey chewed up the order form, so much so that my phone number was impossible to read. A coincidence, not a trick. When Tyler came to pick up the cake, he insisted that I come out to him in the hall, explained the situation, offered to immediately enter my phone number into the memory of his smartphone. So literally from the next day, or rather evening, we started dating. "Listen, Natalie," Emily spoke up in a soft and careful voice. "Aren't you in too much of a hurry? A bachelorette party, a wedding is cool, sure. But are you sure Tyler's right for you? I don't think you two know each other well enough to make plans for married life." Natalie didn't stay silent and replied rather bluntly, "Maybe not enough. I've done the math. It's been 2 months and 12 days since I applied to the registry office. It doesn't seem like much, but I feel like I've known Tyler forever. Maybe it's silly, but I'm sure. He's my man, the one destined by fate." "Well, if that's the case, then there's no question," Emily said in a conciliatory tone, raising her hands in a sign that she was surrendering to the power of love. "It's even worse when a man is tested for years at a time, told to get to know each other better," Rachel said heatedly. "In the end, such a checker most often disappears, leaving only regret about the lost time at best, or even rewarded with a child, which the woman then has to raise alone. The friends around the table were very familiar with such stories. Emily's own nephew was the result of her sister's liaison with such a checker, who turned out to be married. How her mother had cried out when all secret things came to light. It was because of this incident that Emily had to drop out of modeling school. In addition, she was strictly forbidden to apply to the theater college and had to go into sales. Rachel spent a year of her life on a free artist, whom she met at an exhibition. However, this genius recognized in very narrow circles, after various emotional twists informed her that they were quite different, and waved goodbye, going further, as he said, in search of true love. After a while, Rachel could remember this pompous phrase with a chuckle, but at the time she had been quite sad. Even the photos taken during that period still seemed to her some dull and gloomy. It was good that in her life appeared Richard, who was born and lived in the UK, but was Russian by the origin of his parents. With him, she felt she could fly again. Although this relationship was not based more on feelings, but on the opportunity to show her creative talents. After all, Richard's family had something to do with the publication of a famous magazine. And who knew she could make a name for herself in the world of photolayas through this relationship. Ashley, who was careful to pretend that the relationship, stuck for 2 years in the stage of romantic dating, did not bother her in any way. Thought about the fact that determination in a man is a very important quality. Unfortunately, Alex seems to have a life credo of everything will work out somehow without my interference, and it threatens that she herself simply tired of making her favorite hints of varying degrees of transparency. On the desire to marry him talking company once quieted down, such outwardly different beauties, connected by a common childhood in the same yard and school years, bitterly remembered their shattered hopes, which were remarkably similar. After each story, they had to start all over again and try to move on with their lives. The bride, who also had already had a lot of grief in her short life, was silent. Rachel was the first to come to her senses, deciding to bring the conversation back to the previous topic. Girls, there's also an option to rent a cabin at the base for outdoor activities. There's a great place not far from the city. I recently worked there at a wedding. Everything there is so beautiful, stylized at the same time, and under the ranch and under the park with entertainment. Horses, huskies with their expressive eyes, and a little bit of other animals, rabbits, peacocks, goats. Customers are delighted. The nature is gorgeous, and the air, if you get away from the pen with animals, just wonderful. You can go there both for one day and with an overnight stay. There are quite comfortable cabins there. I like them. Our summer camp had never dreamed of such a level of comfort. Memories of having to live in houses made of something like plywood, running to the restroom outside, showering with barely warm water, eating secretly picked apples and dancing at discos, slowly revived the group of friends. The prospect of spending time together in nature seemed successful to all without exception, and the bride was pleased that her bachelorette party will be truly unforgettable. Rachel showed off photos taken at the base. Ashley opened a website on her smartphone, and everyone began to discuss rental homes. Emily wondered aloud if she could even switch shifts so she could attend the big bachelorette party. Laughter and lively conversations resumed over the table. Suddenly, the bride's smartphone played a beautiful romantic tune. Tyler's on the phone, Natalie informed her friends, and they ended the conversation. Yes, I can hear you fine. Yes, I'm with my friends. Yes, we're at a cafe downtown sitting in the cafe discussing the bachelorette party. Natalie fell silent as she listened to her fiancé and then asked in surprise, "What, right today?" "Exactly in an hour and a half." This is so unexpected. I don't even have time to prepare a present. A confused Natalie covered the speaker and turned to her girlfriends for help. Tyler's mom wants me to come over to meet her today. It's her angel day, and she thought this personal holiday was perfect for such an event, especially since Tyler's dad is only flying in for a couple days on a business trip. He won't even be able to attend the wedding, but he really wants to meet me. Go, Emily advised quietly. Otherwise, the future mother-in-law and father-in-law might take offense. Rachel and Ashley nodded in agreement with Emily, and Natalie took her fingers off the speaker and continued talking to Tyler. Yeah, sure. Tell your mom I'll definitely be there. Just tell me what would be the best thing to get her." After a few minutes, during which Natalie's friends listened to her short "yeah, got it," and "okay," the bride ended her conversation with her fiancé and announced, "Tyler is coming to the mall in half an hour to pick me up to get his mom a gift, and some sort of souvenir for his dad in honor of meeting him too. Girls, you sit down, help yourselves, and I'll leave you the money to pay later. We're almost set for next weekend. Seems to suit everyone. Then I'll let you all know on Friday when we're leaving. I think one cab will be the most convenient way for us to go." Rachel interrupted her fiancé. "Okay, Natalie, don't fuss. It's a 5-minute easy walk to the mall. Take your time. We're going to have a quick coffee brewed for us. Just sit back and eat your fish. Then have some coffee to cheer you up a bit. Although we didn't drink much, a glass of champagne doesn't count. Still, the smell has to be masked. Let's eat," Rachel repeated, "because you're probably not going to have much time to eat at this dinner party." Ashley agreed with Rachel's opinion and sympathized with her friend. "Yeah, Natalie, I'll tell you from experience. Meeting a loved one's mom for the first time is a big ordeal. You can't even take a sip of water. It's hard to take a sip of water. So Rachel's right. Eat so you'll have enough energy for the encounter." Despite her friend's reasonable arguments, Natalie nearly burned herself on the coffee she'd brought and hurried away. As the door of the establishment closed behind her, Emily sighed. How nice it would be if that fiancé treated her well and didn't hurt her. "Yeah, she deserves to be happy," Ashley agreed. Rachel added, "Natalie should have a bright streak after a rough patch. Otherwise, it wouldn't be fair at all." Emily picked up her coffee cup. "Girlfriends, let's wish Natalie good luck and hope that her introduction to her fiancé's parents goes well." Rachel, taking a sip of her drink, spoke gloomily. "Still, I really didn't like the behavior of that Jake and his mother. Did she suddenly find out it was her angel's day and decided to spontaneously gather a dinner party for the occasion to meet her son's fiancé?" "I agree," Ashley responded, more like a surprise inspection. "I mean, Tyler knew Natalie was dating us, probably mentioned it to his mom, so the mother-in-law-to-be decided to check it out. She wants to see what Natalie looks like after she meets her friends. Sneaky. It seems like a good reason to invite her son's fiancé. But why couldn't we have done it the right way beforehand? We could have scheduled our meeting for another day." Emily nodded in agreement and added, "And what I didn't like the most was that Tyler made Natalie run to the mall. He could have come here to pick her up. It wouldn't take a minute to drive here. What can I say? It wasn't hard for him to buy his mom a present, a cake, and a drink so Natalie wouldn't worry. She would have just handed it all over on her behalf. But no, he didn't even seem to think about the bride's comfort at all." "Okay, let's hope Tyler just isn't that bad," Rachel summarized. "And may his parents accept our Natalie wholeheartedly." She offered a new coffee toast. As a result of the rush, Natalie arrived at the mall ahead of her fiancé's appointed time. By the time Tyler appeared at the agreed place near the cell phone store, the girl had already managed to buy gifts for his parents. She hadn't even forgotten about the dog she'd been worrying about for almost 2 weeks, but she did not remember the offensive waiting. She bought the groom's mom's pet a treat. Seeing the bride with a bag, Tyler immediately realized that the girl has already had time to shop. He kissed Natalie and praised her. "Ah, how fast you are, well done. Let's go then. Of course, Mom will be surprised that we arrived early, but that's okay." "No, Tyler, if you can take me home. I can't meet your parents like this." "You're always beautiful to me," Tyler consoled with a compliment, and taking the bags from his fiancée, strode towards the exit of the mall as he continued to convince Natalie, "There's no point in trying for the sake of appearing right to my parents. Take my word for it, Mom, much less Dad, are great judges of character. They can't be fooled by pretty clothes, makeup, or pretend right speeches." Natalie, stepping beside her fiancé, began to patiently explain, "Still, I need to stop by the house and change. Trust me, Tyler, a denim sundress and sandals are hardly appropriate for dating. Besides, it's your mom's birthday. It's a celebration. It may not be her birthday, but if she thinks it's right to celebrate it, I should at least minimally fit the occasion. not show up in clothes that are appropriate for a walk or hanging out with friends. Besides, I promise I changed my clothes very quickly. Natalie finished the last sentence as she fastened her seatbelt. Tyler, starting the engine, agreed. All right, we've got plenty of time anyway, thanks to the souvenirs you've already bought. However, Tyler flatly refused to enter the bride's apartment. No, no, and no again. Natalie, I'm too out of control with you alone, and there's a chance we'll be late for my mom's birthday party. She values punctuality above all else. Natalie fretted as she picked out the clothes that were to be her first impression when meeting her future in-laws. But since time was limited, she decided on a comfortable dress with a wide skirt and elbow-length sleeves. Quickly taking a shower, the girl dried and arranged her hair in a neat bundle, and then lightly painted her eyes and lips. Looking at herself in the mirror, Natalie was satisfied with the result and, taking a small purse for her keys and smartphone, hurried to her fiancé. On the way, Tyler asked how the bride's meeting with her friends had gone. The man did not like the fact that Natalie intends to spend the bachelorette party in nature and probably with an overnight stay, and unhappily commented, "I think that's pretty risky. 4 defenseless girls somewhere on a campground where the other visitors might not be the most polite and trustworthy. Whatever you want, I insist you drop the idea. I'd feel safer that way. Here's a restaurant or cafe would be a great option." Natalie was uncomfortable with Tyler being so adamant. However, no matter how much she tried to explain that this recreation center was frequented by families with children and respectable weddings, the man was adamant. "Natalie, for me, unacceptable to me such a format of your hen party, and it will be very unpleasant if you ignore my opinion." Natalie tried to apply what she thought was the most convincing argument she could think of. "Tyler, but it's not like I'm even getting involved in how you plan to spend your farewell to bachelorhood, because I trust you completely." Tyler smiled. "You're good at that, especially since I'm not going to do anything indecent either. Anyway, I really hope you make the right decision and change the venue for the bachelorette party. I hope you understand. It's important to be able to compromise. If I say something is important to me, it really is. And it's your job to listen to my opinion?" When irreconcilable differences arise, even at the stage of wedding planning, it is a reason to change plans, even if there is little time left before the celebration. Unfortunately, I have the example of my parents in front of me. They are incredibly different. Since I was a teenager, I could not understand how they could even fall in love and get married. They were always at odds with each other, and although they did not descend to violence, breaking dishes or even loud scandals, but the atmosphere in the house was heavy. I think we've all been happier since the divorce. Mom and Dad are even talking normally more often. They don't walk past each other with grim faces and petty complaints anymore. Paradoxically, since Dad moved to another city, he and Mom have gotten along much better. They already discuss issues calmly and don't fight at all. That's what I'm telling you, Natalie. You see, I really wish you wouldn't argue with me on principle. Harmony and lack of arguments is very important to me." At the conclusion of this speech, Tyler parked the car. Then he turned to Natalie, smiled very warmly at her, ran his fingers gently over her cheek, and confessed, "However, I believe that you and I have a love that can overcome all obstacles and some problems with mutual understanding. Right?" Yes, Natalie could only exhale. And the man suggested, "Well, then let's go meet my parents, love." Tyler carefully supported Natalie as she stumbled on the way to the driveway door, and squeezing her elbow lightly, asked, "Don't worry, please. I'm sure everyone will like you." The girl took a deep breath, then slowly exhaled, and was already almost calm before the beautiful, elegant couple. Tyler introduced the bride to her parents. "Meet my Natalie. I think you and she are sure to find common topics of conversation and become friends." "Nice to meet you." Tyler's mom stepped forward as if about to hug the girl, but instead only spoke in a pleasant, soft voice. "Welcome. Just in case, my name is Joan Vasilievna, and this is my ex-husband and a very nice man, Bruce Maximovich. Is it okay, Natalie, if I communicate with you in a straightforward manner right away?" After waiting for her son's fiancée to nod her head, the woman continued, "We're keeping things simple tonight. a house party for the people closest to us. And I do hope that you will soon be rightfully included in that circle. You may call me simply Joan." "Very nice to meet you." Natalie smiled at the groom's parents and handed over the gift bags. Bruce Maximovich, accepting the souvenir, praised the girl for a good choice. And Joan Vasilyevna gently reprimanded both her son and his daughter-in-law that it was not worth spending. After all, a birthday party is not even a birthday. But I'm very pleased. A hysterical dog squeal was heard from under the closed kitchen door, and the landlady smiled. That's Schnurok resenting being shut in. "Natalie, don't you have a prejudice against pets? They walk freely about the apartment." The girl, amazed at this delicacy, replied cheerfully, "No, not at all, Joan Vasilyevna. I've always dreamed of having a dog, but it didn't work out. I'll be glad to meet your pet. By the way, they told me at the pet store that this is a treat." Natalie handed the package to the groom's mother. "Many dogs like it. I hope Lace will like it." "Very nice," the woman smiled, accepted the treat for her pet, and asked her son and Greg to let the dog out. Let him meet the guest, since he has no objections. Lace turned out to be a cute, short dog devoid of body hair but with long hair on his ears and tail. Joan Vasilyevna lovingly boasted actually he's a terribly pedigreed Chinese crested. His full nickname is a bit highbrow, unrivaled masterpiece from the Celestial Empire. How's that? However, very quickly his name was shortened to Schnurk, because he manages to constantly get tangled underfoot. Bruce Maximovich jokingly raised his hand as if he were a student at school, and, intercepting his ex-wife's glance, spoke, "Excuse me. But if Joan starts talking about her pet, we risk never sitting down at the table. She loves him beyond measure. If she treated me half as warmly as she does him, we'd probably still be married." The woman laughed melodiously and agreed with her ex-husband. "Indeed. Let's go to the table." Natalie felt that the major tests of tonight were still to come, but the acute excitement had let go a little. She did everything her hostess suggested and waited anxiously for the questioning to begin. However, the conversations revolved around wedding arrangements and simple topics like the weather. It wasn't until the kettle, cups and cakes had been put on the table by Tyler and his dad that the birthday girl started the main topic from afar. "I guess, Natalie, your pastry shop has better products. But I didn't want to burden you, so I bought what they recommended from the reputable department. By the way, Tyler's a secretive guy, so we didn't get much information about you from him. Just that you helped him place my birthday cake order. And frankly, I'm just curious. So, tell me more about yourself, please. Anything you think is relevant and important." The girl with a sudden lump in her throat began to tell. "I'm afraid that I won't tell anything interesting. I live alone in the apartment of my parents, who died 7 years ago. I had just finished school and entered university, but I couldn't study there because of my serious condition. If it wasn't for the support of my friends, I don't know what would have happened to me." Emily, Ashley, and Rachel took turns staying overnight. Talking to me and distracting me from my scary thoughts, they forced me to clean, to take care of myself. Rachel, through her mom, who teaches at a food processing college, literally shoved me into the facility so I would be supervised as much as possible. I didn't care at first. I was living the dream, and then I really got into the profession. My Aunt Rachel was my supervisor at the bakery where I work even after I graduated. She recommended me. In my free time, I try to read, walk around the city. My whole life is summed up in this short story. Joan was the first to remember. "I'm sorry for your loss and hope that the worst that could have happened is now behind you." Natalie thanked her hostess, and not wanting to spoil the party with her sad mood, turned her attention to Schnur, who just in time began to grumble hilariously at the treats given to him. The atmosphere became pleasant again, but the girl felt morally devastated. It was still hard for her to say aloud that she was an orphan, and even the past years had not dulled the bitterness of the loss. Now, however, Natalie had a chance to find a family, and she, like her future mother-in-law, hoped for the best. Of course, the girl was a little confused by the fact that Tyler had spoken so harshly about the place of the bachelorette party. But for the sake of mutual understanding, the bride was ready to change her intentions, only if her favorite was satisfied. Walking Natalie home, Tyler shared his thoughts with her. "Everything went just wonderful. I noticed that my mom really liked you, and my dad was fascinated by you. I didn't doubt it, though. You're a marvel." Despite her extreme fatigue, Natalie was pleased with how the meeting with her fiancé's parents had gone. She fell asleep with a smile on her lips. For now, she was sure that everything would work out wonderfully for her and Tyler. However, Rachel, who the bride had called in the morning to inform her of the change of venue for the bachelorette party, made her a little hesitant about a harmonious and serene relationship with her future husband. "Look, Natalie, something doesn't feel right to me. Somehow he reacted to a quite decent vacation base. If he's acting like this now, it's only going to get worse. He'll probably ban you from talking to us too. To keep you from being a bad influence or something." "Rachel, I don't think you're right. It's just that Tyler is worried about me. So let's move the bachelorette party to a nice little floating restaurant on the waterfront." Rachel hummed and snickered. "Yeah, just don't tell yours about it, or he won't approve of such hot spots." "Rachel, why are you ruining my mood?" Natalie said. Then, a few seconds later, she added, "Actually, you're right. The people there probably aren't very trustworthy. So I'm going to make the decision to celebrate the way Ashley suggested. Nice and classy. We'll be at the rooftop restaurant. I'll text you the exact time." "Okay, bye. I still have Ashley and Emily to call." Natalie felt her companion smile as she said goodbye, making her mood more positive. At the agreed time, the friends gathered for the bachelorette party. Although Natalie had originally dreamed of something completely different, everything went perfectly. Rachel took exquisite photos. Ashley was delighted that the bride had chosen her option. Emily was just having fun looking at her friends. Natalie was happy and didn't realize she had a less than peaceful future after the wedding. Perhaps only the first honeymoon with Tyler could be called truly serene. And then everything began to go wrong. Shortly after returning from a honeymoon, her husband-in-law suggested, "Natalie, and let's you and I buy an apartment closer to the center and a meter larger. After all, sooner or later, but we will have to worry about children. But there are no optimal conditions for this, neither in your one bedroom, where we live now, nor in my studio. Of course, we can squeeze in. We can think of something, but it's all wrong. In my opinion, it is desirable to envisage everything and equip with the maximum possible comfort in advance. I am ready to sell my apartment, but I will not have enough money for a normal variant. I don't want to take out a loan or get into a mortgage." Natalie's face showed doubt. Tyler, noticing it, started kissing his wife, saying, "What are you so worried about, baby? If you don't like the idea, I'm open to your suggestion. But imagine how great it would be to live downtown. It's a close commute to work for me there, and I'm sure you'd be accepted at any establishment on our pedestrian street. You see, Tyler, I'm very attached to my apartment. Here I feel like the walls and things still remember my parents. It's probably naive, maybe even stupid, but that's how I feel," Natalie said with a tray. Tyler, hugging his young wife tightly, began to comfort her. "Well, what are you getting upset about?" "But honey, I'm not forcing you, I'm just suggesting it. Telling you about our family's plan to expand our living space. And you somehow misunderstood everything, as I think. I wanted what was best. And your eyes are already wet. Don't cry. At least we'll rearrange your place to make room for everyone. Or even more interesting, we'll live in separate apartments and visit each other. I read somewhere that the royals used to sleep in separate bedrooms. Well, we'll beat them to the punch that way. Can you imagine the romance of going to your wife's house for a date?" Natalie smiled involuntarily and promised Tyler, "I'll think about it. I need to weigh the arguments in favor of selling this apartment and buying a new one. You realize all the nuances need to be considered. Take your time to answer, please." Of course, Tyler hastily agreed, gradually dragging his wife along to improve her mood in a simple but effective way. He murmured that he wanted them to have children in the very near future. Natalie herself dreamed of giving him a son and then a daughter, or the other way around. It didn't matter, as long as the children grew up healthy. However, the pregnancy that came a few months later proved to be a very difficult test for Natalie's body. She had to stay in the hospital early on, and when she was released home, she found Tyler pulling further away from her. He didn't even spend the night at her apartment every day. That said, he always had various excuses for his behavior at the ready. I work nights if that's what it takes. Imagine me pounding on the keyboard and disturbing your rest. Is that the right thing to do? You should be getting a full night's sleep. Sometimes he deliberately ignored her desire for tenderness. Tyler would say reproachfully, "Natalie, your main job right now is to carry our treasure, and anything stupid can have unfortunate consequences. Let's be patient, even though it's hard for me." Her husband was stealthily leading her to the necessity of selling the apartment after all. Because then, he said, we would be quietly placed in different rooms. Imagine, I will always be near. If you call out, I'll be there in a second. Whenever Tyler's parents came to visit, alone or together, Natalie pretended that everything was fine with their son and never once complained about his coldness, though she wished she could. Only with her friends, who visited her whenever possible, was she frank. "I know this pregnancy is not good for me at all. When I was lying in the hospital, I heard that the girl takes away the beauty of the mother. And now I'm terrified of myself. Of course, I understand Tyler, who wants to hang out with someone like that." Her friends assured Natalie that she was being too hard on herself, and that in principle the small swellings did not spoil her at all. But the woman was inexorable. "No, my good ones. Thank you, of course, for your support, but I see myself in the mirror. It's just awful." After Natalie voiced the idea of expanding her living space by selling her apartment to her friends, they marveled beyond belief. Emily, Ashley, and Rachel tried to convince her that selling the marital property was unforgivably stupid. "Better take out a mortgage with Tyler," Ashley advised. "You can have tenants in your apartments, so you'll have something to pay your dues with. Think about it, because if you do, you'll have to share what you've got." Natalie wrinkled her nose, but she had to listen to her friend's lectures. By the way, yes, Rachel agreed with Ashley. I can think of many examples where the apartment issue has ruined relationships. Emily usually kept quiet, but one day she got angry. "Don't you realize that your Tyler is just fine? Is he comfortable living here and there at your place? Or do his parents have that kind of freedom? If he was a real man, who was responsible for his family, he would have offered to take out a mortgage, not to persuade you to sell the apartment." However, even realizing that her friends wish her well, the young wife continued to believe her husband. Tyler, however, gave all new arguments. "You see, we are about to start a completely unusual, previously unexplored by us stage of life. I think it would be logical to start it in a new place." One day, the man sat Natalie down at the table with a mysterious look, opened his laptop, and began to demonstrate cottages of various sizes, explaining, "A wonderful village is being built 20 kilometers from the city. All the infrastructure is attached to my place of work to go even faster than from your apartment. The plot at the house is not very large, but enough for a playground and for all sorts of beauty. It will even be possible to get a real dog, not a misunderstanding like a parental Spitz. Imagine how great it will be to raise our daughter outdoors. The cost is still not very high, and this is our chance to make a good investment. I've already sold my condo and am ready to invest in a dream home. Let's pick the location and the option we like best." "And how much does the smallest cottage with a plot cost?" Natalie asked. And when she heard the price, her heart sank. That's not cheap at all. Tyler said, "Well, unfortunately, it's only going to get more expensive. It's a very convenient location. People are going to start hustling and prices are going to skyrocket. You should take it while you can, but don't worry. We're not going to touch your apartment. I'll figure out where to find the money myself." Tyler ended his presentation of his future dream home with a tender kiss, and there was a peace in his wife's heart. She thought, "The girls were wrong to suspect my husband of bad intentions. He's not like that at all." If Natalie had foreseen what would happen next, she would have talked Tyler out of buying the cottage. But things had turned out to be a happy streak replaced by an endless nightmare. The woman watched in dismay as Tyler grew more and more morose by the day. Once, when she escaped from the hospital, where the hot water was suddenly cut off, to at least have a human bath, she heard her husband, who had apparently come to her apartment to water the flowers, talking to someone on the phone in raised tones. "I told you that everything will be fine. Give me time. Let me give you money. Calm down." As if sensing or hearing his wife enter the apartment, Tyler hastily curtailed the conversation. "That's it, stand down." Natalie didn't pretend she hadn't heard anything and asked, "Tyler, let's be honest, what kind of money were we talking about?" The man fussed, worried. "Shouldn't you be in the hospital? What's wrong?" "Tyler, don't change the subject. I just came to wash up. Nothing's wrong, except that overheard conversation makes me worried." Tyler, taking his wife's hands in his and looking straight into her eyes, began to tell her, "Please, Natalie, don't say anything to my parents. I don't want them to worry. I dreamed of keeping everything a secret from you, but I can't resist your worried eyes. Natalie, I'm in a serious bind. To make a long story short, I have a very substantial sum of money to give to some serious people. I'm already being pressured and threatened." Tyler wrote. Without thinking and without consulting anyone, Natalie transferred all the money she had saved to Tyler's card. Then, realizing that the amount wasn't enough, she sighed and said, "To a rental apartment, and let's get a power of attorney for you to sell my apartment." Tyler kissed his wife in joy, and then promised that the situation would improve. "The main thing is that thanks to your help, we will not lose our cottage. I will pay off the debt and start the renovation. By the time our family expands, we will be able to move in." Natalie's confidence was transferred to him. She stretched blissfully on the comfortable bed. And then, when Tyler's notary came to the apartment, she calmly listened to all the explanations and signed the deed without hesitation. Afterward, Natalie, tired but satisfied that she had saved her husband, dozed off. Tyler made her dinner and drove her back to the hospital for her evening treatments. "Thank you, sweetheart." The man thanked fervently, saying goodbye to his wife near the door of the medical facility. "There's a thermos of morsels in the bag. Drink, it is vitamin. I boiled the rosehip myself according to a recipe from the internet." Natalie woke up in the morning with a sharp pain in her abdomen. Despite the doctor's efforts, the pregnancy could not be saved. The woman howled with grief, and only after sedation did she quiet down to sobbing. Due to complications, Natalie was transferred to another hospital where she spent the next long 3 weeks. During this time, she did not want to see anyone she knew and forbade her friends, her husband, and his parents to visit her. The hospital psychologist, who had seen all kinds of grief, gave standard recommendations, but they did not make the woman feel any better. The day Natalie was discharged from the hospital, Tyler picked her up, and the woman didn't hear a word of reproach from him. She tried to be firm, answered her husband's questions in one-word answers, and did not shed a single tear. But when Tyler opened the door to the unfamiliar apartment where the boxes of her belongings stood, Natalie burst into tears. She mourned everything at once: her tiny daughter, who had never seen the world and was not even considered a human being yet, but was called by the strange, soulless word fetus. Tears were pouring down for the soon-to-be-sold apartment, where she had once been so serenely happy with her beloved parents. The thought of her belongings being boxed up by someone else's hands brought another flood of tears to Natalie's eyes. Tyler tried to comfort his wife, but she asked him to leave her alone and collapsed on the strange bed. Natalie didn't want to say anything, and it was too much to listen to empty words. The tragedy had caused a deep rift between the couple. The relationship that had seemed so strong had broken down. Natalie still did not want to talk to anyone and asked for a leave of absence over the phone. Her boss, sympathizing with her grief, agreed but warned her, "You have a month to get back to work. I'm sorry, I cannot tolerate longer. You know, it's a hot season ahead, and I need to be staffed." Natalie muttered that she would try her best and ended the conversation. Her mother-in-law, who was visiting and had heard the conversation, decided to cheer her up. "Natasha, I think you're wrong. On the contrary, you should be in public more. You should do something, and your grief would go away. Yes, what happened to you is very unfair, but you have to move on. Get a grip on yourself and move on. Joan Vasilievna, you just don't realize the insensitive crap you say just to say something," Natalie blurted out in frustration. Tyler, noticing that her mother was offended, tried to smooth things over. "Natalie didn't mean to be so harsh at all." "No, I very much meant it," the furious woman objected. "Why? Was it Joan Vasilievna who thought I'd be relieved by her stupid moralizing? Who do you think you are, Joan Vasilievna? You don't answer? That's right." Joan Vasilyevna shook her head and reported, "Tyler, I see your wife is not at all pleased with me. I think I'll go now so as not to escalate the situation." The guest sadly began to dress, and Tyler, seeing his mom's deliberately slow movements, ordered his wife, "Natalie, apologized to my mom immediately. You have no right to talk to her like that. She only wishes you well, and you are behaving like an ungrateful, spoiled child." The pupils in Natalie's eyes suddenly dilated, as if she saw something terrible before her. Jumping up from the bed she was sitting on, the woman rushed over to Tyler and began blaming him for what had happened to her. "I figured it out. You can stop pretending anymore. This is all because of you. How dare you?" Natalie's voice was getting louder and louder. She was blaming her husband for causing her to lose her baby by putting something contraindicated in pregnancy into her morsels. "I'm going to the police now. Let them check why it was our baby that died." Joan Vasilyevna tried to reason with her sister-in-law. "Jesus, Natalie, you're just out of your mind with grief. Remember, you've had a troubled pregnancy from the beginning. It's not Tyler's fault." However, all persuasion was futile. Natalie continued to shout accusations at her husband. "Tyler, why are you doing this? You're only doing this sneaky thing for money. Shame on you. I trusted you." In the end, Joan Vasilyevna could not stand the attacks on her son and ordered him, "Tyler, call an ambulance. Just tell the dispatcher to send a specialty team." "I'm not crazy," Natalie shouted. "And anyway, Tyler, I don't want anything more to do with you." "Well, that's fine," the man replied. "Go anywhere you want, I'm divorcing you. Remember, you'll be left with nothing. I think carefully and don't be stupid. Where will you go without money?" Grabbing her bag with her documents and phone, Natalie threw on a down jacket right over her house robe, pulled her boots on her bare feet. Pushing her mother-in-law away from the door, she ran out into the entrance, and soon she was rushing down the street, not caring about the road, just to get away from the man whom she had recently considered the center of her personal universe. As she ran, Natalie turned off the constantly ringing phone, and her feet, which had already begun to feel the January cold, brought themselves to Rachel's house. She didn't even have to ring the intercom. Her friend came out of the door in person and gasped when she saw Natalie. "How are you here?" The photographer's trained eye instantly picked up on the oddities in Natalie's appearance, and Rachel took her hand and dragged her along. "Come on. I have an emergency meeting right now, but Mom's home, she'll keep you warm. I'll try to get back as soon as possible." Natalie obediently complied with everything Aunt Nadia said, and after drinking a large glass of tea, she obediently lay down on the sofa and suddenly fell asleep. When the exhausted woman awoke from a salutary forgetfulness, her friend was already sitting beside her. Little by little, trying not to become hysterical, Natalie told the people she trusted about her suspicions and received the support she needed. After the legal battle, the woman was left practically destitute. The cottage, supposedly bought by Tyler, turned out to be registered to a completely different person. By some strange injustice, the judge considered the money Natalie had transferred to her husband to be a repayment of her debt. Ashley, supporting her friend after the hearing, said, "Don't despair, we'll appeal." This phrase was heard by Joan Vasilyevna, who appeared in the Temple of Modern Themis, not only blind, but also deaf, and loudly declared, "Serve wherever you want, you'll only waste your money. I've got connections you can't beat." Tyler, looking disdainfully at his now ex-wife, snidely added, "And I warned you to refrain from divorce. See, I did as I promised, leaving you practically penniless." No more talking to her. Joan took Tyler under her elbow and led her son away. The friends gathered in Rachel and her mom's apartment were supporting Natalie as best they could. Aunt Nancy suggested, "Look, why don't you stay here for a while?" "Yeah, Mom's right," Rachel echoed, "especially since I've been invited for an internship and I'll be flying out in a few months. So make yourself completely comfortable. I think Mom will have more fun with you too." Bit by bit, Natalie was coming back to life, ridding herself of the memories of married life with Tyler. Despite entreaties from her bosses, the woman quit her job at the candy store so that no unpleasant memories would arise. Aunt Nancy helped her daughter's friend get a job at college in a position that did not require a teaching degree. She never tired of telling Natalie, "Everything will be all right. Take some time to rest and recover, and then you can do whatever you feel like doing. Natalie's first step toward recovery was a cake she had made on her own initiative for the birthday of one of the oldest teachers at the college. Aunt Nancy had merely hinted that the woman loved sweets. However, this was enough to make Natalie's creative nature strive for a new life, all the more so because there were people ready to support her. And from some of them she could not expect help, and it was very valuable and pleasant. In the 6 months that had passed since the divorce, Tyler had hardly remembered Natalie. In fact, looking at the country cottage, which had become his property, albeit a little fraudulently, and at the amount of money that had been deposited in his account, he felt a deep satisfaction at his cunning and his mother's cunning. It was Joan, after all, who had found him such a suitable bride, who, except for empty-headed girlfriends, had no one else in the world. A real miracle. If it hadn't been for the tragedy of the unborn child, it would have been possible to live with her a little longer. However, after the loss, Natalie seemed to lose her mind and began to accuse him of all sorts of things. Of course, he had no special love for her, but the suspicion that he had poisoned her was beyond reason. A woman like that was no way to go on living. Tyler tried not to spend the money he had swindled from his naive ex-wife. His mother had warned him, and he himself had already realized that it was expensive to keep a house in a cottage community. So it is necessary to find a steady income, and it is desirable that for this purpose did not have to work. Not long ago, the man received an offer to invest in a business that promises a stable and high income. The case for Tyler was new, but he, full of ambition, decided to act straightforwardly. Negotiations with him were started by a mediator, but the man, padding his price, demanded to discuss all the details with the person authorized to make decisions. After a pause, the potential partner agreed. Excited by the prospects that would open up to him if the partnership took place, Tyler dashingly parked outside the restaurant where the meeting was scheduled. After assessing his appearance in the large mirror at the entrance, the man entered the restaurant's lounge, looked around, and caught a glimpse of a ravishing woman. If I didn't have an appointment, Tyler thought to himself, I'd certainly walk over to have an affair. The woman turned around as if sensing an eager gaze studying her, and nearly fell over in surprise. It turned out that he dreamed of meeting his own ex-wife. It was somehow uncomfortable to run away silently, and he went to Natalie, feeling a mixture of the most contradictory emotions. Hello, Natalie. What are you doing here? The prices here are so expensive, not everyone can afford it. And as I recall, you don't have much left. Natalie didn't respond kindly to the disguised rudeness and snapped back. Yes, thank you for remembering how you ripped me off and admitting it. The cruel grimace on Natalie's face was replaced by a slight smile as she looked behind Tyler's back. The man instinctively turned around to check who had caused her joy and was surprised for the second time in the last few minutes. Hello, son. Bruce gestured to a chair and ordered a seat at the table across from Natalie. I've come in place of the man you expected to see at the meeting. When a stunned Tyler, who looked as if all the enthusiasm had been drained out of him, lowered himself into the indicated seat, Bruce continued. Anyway, son, I'll be brief. You will now immediately make restitution to Natalie for all the damage you have caused her. With moral compensation, of course. Tyler tried to object. I don't know what Natalie has told you, but none of it is true. If you listen to her, I'm a criminal. Throwing his ex-wife an angry look, the man added, addressing her, you should be thankful I didn't file a libel suit against you, or I would have. Bruce intervened, not allowing his son to finish. Just be cool, Tyler. Natalie didn't tell me anything. If it weren't for some helpful people, I wouldn't know anything about your meanness. Luckily, I still have a lot of acquaintances in this town, and all secrets always come out. I'm very hurt that my son pulled such an ugly scam, betraying an innocent man. I hope you realize you can't fight against my connections. Tyler reluctantly nodded, and Bruce finished his speech. Anyway, I'll be in town for a month, and I'll personally make sure Natalie gets everything she's due. And don't try to find any loopholes or workarounds that will allow you to embezzle anything. Act like an honest man. Tyler and Joan were shocked that they had to give back to the naive orphan everything they had managed to take away. But they didn't dare compete with the famous lawyer Bruce. In the end, thanks to the help of sympathetic people, Natalie managed to get out of the difficult situation in which she found herself against her will. Even the strong sometimes need support. A pregnant taxi driver gave a fortune teller a lift to an abandoned house, and as soon as she unfolded the note, Angelina cheerfully ran down the steps of the polyclinic and practically jumped up and down the pavement towards the house. Passers-by looked in surprise at the running girl, who shone and charged the surrounding people with positivity. They, of course, did not understand the reason for the great joy, but just smiled looking at her. And there was a lot to be happy about. Angelina was pregnant. She had been dating Jonathan for almost 2 years and had been waiting for him to propose. But her lover kept putting it off and putting it off. But now they will definitely get married. On the way home, Angelina ran into the shop, bought groceries to prepare a festive dinner, and during it to tell her beloved the amazing news. Angelina rented a room in a flat from a very nice elderly woman. They often had tea together in the evenings. Kimberly talked about her life, sometimes giving advice not obsessively, but kindly and from the heart. When Angelina had first invited Jonathan to her flat, with the landlady's permission, Kimberly had told him after he left that he was no match for Angelina. "He's not a serious young man," Kimberly said. "You can't build a strong relationship with him. You'll see, he'll prove himself. You'll remember what I said." But time passed, the relationship developed, and Jonathan never showed any bad behavior. Angelina calmed down and decided that Kimberly had made a mistake. Angelina flew into the flat. "Kimberly, I'm home," she announced happily, so loudly that the neighbors 1 floor below and 1 floor above must have heard her. "Oh my God, you're glowing." Kimberly smiled, looking at her tenant. "Did they give you a bonus, or did you win the lottery?" Kimberly asked. No, I'd rather tell you now." "Are you going to be happy too?" Angelina replied excitedly. "You just calm down first and then you'll tell me." "I can't calm down. I can't. I'm the happiest person in the world." Angelina rejoiced. "Sit down, and I'll tell you all about it," she said. Kimberly looked at Angelina with slight impatience. She was a bit curious and couldn't stand secrets, so Angelina began to speak. "I was at the antenatal clinic today." She paused meaningfully and added, "I'm pregnant. Can you imagine I'm going to have a baby?" Kimberly looked at Angelina in surprise. "Aren't you excited?" she asked, a little upset. "No, why would I be excited? A child for a woman is happiness and the meaning of life." "And who is the father?" Kimberly asked for some reason. "I mean, who is the father?" "Jonathan, of course," Angelina answered. "Oh yeah, why me? Don't mind me. Sclerosis is setting in." That's what Kimberly always said when she was trying to get out of a discussion about a situation she wasn't comfortable with. Angelina had learned her well over the past 4 years. "Kimberly, don't upset me. Do you still think Jonathan's not right for me?" she asked. "But we've been together for 2 years. In that time, has he ever behaved inappropriately or offended me in any way?" "But he hasn't." "Then why don't you love him so much?" Angelina asked the woman almost in tears. "I'm sorry, baby. I did not want to spoil your mood, but I do not like your chosen one, and all here. I don't have anything to pick on, but my gut tells me he's no good," Kimberly said. "When we marry him, we'll see what you have to say," Angelina retorted resentfully. God willing," Kimberly said cryptically and went to her room. Angelina's mood was frayed. She went to the kitchen, unpacked the bags, and confidently dialed her lover's number. "Jonathan, are you going to be at work much longer today?" she asked. "I don't know yet. What is it?" Jonathan asked. "I have something very important to do tonight," Angelina answered. "Try to be home by 7, Angelina said. "I will. What is it?" Jonathan asked. But Angelina did not give any concrete answer, of course. She said that she would give all the details in the evening. Usually, when there was a celebration, Angelina always invited Kimberly to the table. But tonight she asked her grandmother to have dinner in her room. "Grandma, Kimberly, please, I want it to be just the 2 of us," she said. "We can have dinner in my room, of course, but it won't be very comfortable. Can we have the kitchen for the evening? I'll bring dinner to your room, "We can, baby, we can," Kimberly replied. "Especially since it's my favorite movie tonight." Thank you so much, Angelina hugged her grandmother. Jonathan arrived around 8 o'clock in the evening. Angelina was already nervous and called her lover several times to find out where he was and when he would be there. Jonathan strongly disliked such control and always reacted violently to the girl's calls. "What, are you calling me every half an hour again?" "I told you I'm coming," the young man said angrily. Okay, I'm waiting for you." "Don't be nervous," Angelina reassured him. Jonathan entered the flat in a bad mood. It was hard to understand why. He wasn't in the mood today. He was always in trouble at work, he said, and he often came home unhappy. Sometimes it was Angelina's phone calls that put him in a bad mood. "Hi, honey. I'm all set. Let's go to dinner," Angelina said. "I'll wash my hands," Jonathan muttered and went to the bathroom. Angelina was very nervous. She did not know how to start the conversation. Plus, Jonathan's mood was throwing her off balance. They sat down at the table, which was festively set, and Jonathan noticed it. "What did I miss? Is it someone's birthday today?" he asked. "No, Jonathan, we have another occasion." Eat. We'll talk later," Angelina said. "Tell me what happened." "I hate your secrets," Jonathan grumbled. His mood had not improved, even after the delicious dinner. Angelina tensed. Maybe I shouldn't tell him now. Why not? On the contrary, he'll be happy and cheer up, she thought. "Jonathan, I went to the hospital today," Angelina said. "Are you ill?" Jonathan interrupted her. "Not really. Not at all," Angelina answered. She paused for a moment and added confidently, "We are going to have a child." Angelina waited for him to take her in his arms like in the cinema, kissing her and wrapping her in his arms. But Jonathan sat motionless and stared at Angelina. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" he asked, barely audibly. "I said we're going to have a baby." "I went to the antenatal clinic today and the doctor confirmed the pregnancy," Angelina repeated. Tears came to her eyes. She was very offended by this reaction of her beloved. The worst thing was that he was silent and did not comment on what she had heard. "Would you please say something?" I asked the girl. "What do you want me to say?" Jonathan asked. "I don't know, for example, that you are happy too." "And if I'm not glad," he said. Tears ran down Angelina's cheeks. They had talked about this topic once before, and Jonathan had said then that he didn't see himself as a father and that it was too early for him to think about it, although Angelina is already 28 and Jonathan is 31. But that conversation took place a year ago and Angelina was hoping things had changed, but apparently not. "What are you crying about? What did I say? I told you a long time ago that I do not want to be a father." "I'm not interested." "Can I not want to?" Jonathan started to attack. "It's you women who dream of having lots of children and sitting around snotting and crying." "I don't like it. I told you that honestly, by the way. But we've been unprotected for the last 6 months. I thought." "You thought? Is it really your problem whether you use protection or not? Or rather, the consequences of it," he interrupted Angelina. "What do we do now?" she asked through her tears. "It's 9 weeks. You're like a little girl, honestly. Even I know that before 12 weeks you can easily solve this problem." "It's not a problem. It's a little live human being." "Are you suggesting I get rid of it?" Angelina exclaimed. "Look, let's skip the drama," Jonathan grumbled. "It's your choice." "I'm not a part of this," Jonathan said. He got up from the table and was about to leave the kitchen. Suddenly, he stopped and turned round. "When you've solved the problem, call me. I don't want you with a belly. Sorry to be frank, but honest," he said and walked out of the flat, slamming the door loudly. Angelina sat in the kitchen. Her world had crumbled. In an instant, all dreams and plans had been destroyed by some 20-minute conversation. She had been so hopeful that a bright streak was beginning in her life. But alas, apparently being happy was not her lot. Angelina got up from the table, looked out the window and decided it wasn't too late to go for a walk. She took her jumper and walked confidently out of the flat. There was a small park near the house, and Kimberly sometimes walked through it before going to bed. But today the girl went for a walk alone and really wanted to be alone with her thoughts. Angelina sat down on a bench at the far end of the park and began to remember her life, starting with her childhood, which she remembered very well, although it would be better if she didn't remember at all. The girl had never had a father. Or rather, he was somewhere, of course, but Angelina had never seen or known him. How many times she tried to find out from her mother, but she stubbornly withheld information about him. She and her mother lived alone. To say that they lived poorly, nothing to say. Her mother worked 2 jobs, but still not enough money. At the age of 15, Angelina started to work part-time at the market. She received a pittance, but at least some help to their family budget. When she was 16, she was attacked, helped by Armin, for whom she worked. After that, she stopped coming to the market and got a job as an evening cleaner in a salon. The owner of the salon knew Angelina and simply took pity on the girl. After graduating from school, she entered medical college but left it in the 2nd year because her mother became very ill and it was simply not possible to study full-time. To get at least some profession, Angelina finished hairdressing courses. But all salons and hairdressing salons were staffed with masters, and it was unrealistic to find a job. Besides, she had no experience at all. Thanks to a neighbor, Angelina got a job as a shop assistant. This job was a salvation for her. Firstly, the salary was more or less normal. Secondly, the shop was in their house, and if necessary, the girl could always run home to her mother. Angelina had a friend, Molly, the only person close to her. The only one, because her mother always kept Angelina at a distance. Sometimes it seemed to the girl that her mother hated her and considered her guilty of living like this. Angelina felt it, but her mother never said it directly. The friends were very different. Angelina was calm, quiet, closed off to everyone. And Molly was the complete opposite. But despite these differences, the girls had been friends since the 3rd grade. Molly was from a normal family with parents and a stable average income. Sometimes she gave her friend her things, bought some food, sweets, and even taught Angelina to drive a car when the girls were already 19. Look, anything can come in handy in life. How hard is it for you to learn how to do that? How do you know what life has in store for you? What if you marry a millionaire? He gives you a car and you can't drive. What would you do? Molly smiled. Would you make one for yourself? What millionaire? Where would he come from? Replied Angelina. Well, I don't know. It happens in the cinema. That's in the cinema. I don't believe in such things in life. It doesn't happen like that. Well, we'll see. After a while, Angelina took a course and got her driving license. Molly made her do it. 6 months later, Angelina's mom died of cancer. The girl was left all alone. Except for her friend, she had no one. Angelina changed her job and began to live in hope for the future. She got a job in a private firm and worked as a courier. She was even given a car to use. So 3 years passed. One evening, when Angelina was returning from work, she received a phone call from Molly, who asked her to visit her. It was a matter of some urgency. Okay, I'll be at your place in half an hour, Angelina agreed. Molly met her friend in a very emotional state. Oh my God, what happened? Angelina was terrified. I'm going to tell you something. You'll just fall down, she began to intrigue her friend. I wouldn't like that, Angelina smiled. Tell me what you want to know. Do you remember Thomas from the parallel class? Thomas who? Thomas Jones. I remember him in general terms. What does he look like? Of course I remember. But I never had much contact with him. What happened to him? Nothing exactly happened to him. Molly was too emotional, jumping from one thought to another. Anyway, I met him by chance recently, and he suggested that I go to Italy with him for 3 years. It's just a quick sham marriage. What do you need to arrange? Angelina was surprised. Why would you do that? And why did he suggest you? Calm down and explain. I don't understand. Oh, what don't you understand? He always had a soft spot for me at school, tried to court me, but I wasn't really attracted to him. I didn't like him. And now I've met him. He's so handsome now, he's so cute. We sat in a cafe, reminisced about school and stuff. And when he walked me home, he proposed to me. I still don't get it. Why would you do that? What does he want? Let him go to his internship. Really? It's Italy. When will I ever have a chance to live in Italy at the expense of some company he works for? They pay for everything, traveling and accommodation. What's wrong with you? It's great 3 years in a foreign, but so beautiful country at someone else's expense. And you'll just get high, Molly continued. It's like a jackpot. Well, I don't know, I wouldn't go, Angelina replied. You, of course, but I'm me. And I'm going. My parents even let me go already. Go, of course. It's your decision, your choice. Maybe I'd go, but no one would offer me that. Don't make it up. There'll be a holiday on your street. Yes, with my happiness it will be, Angelina grinned. You know, I was thinking of leaving this city. I want to try to change my life. In our city, where almost every dog knows you, it's unrealistic. Now that you're leaving, I'm definitely leaving. What am I going to do here? That's right. Why not give it a try? How will you sell the flat? I won't sell it yet. I don't know what the situation will be. At least I'll have a place to come back to if anything happens. It's all familiar and native here, and every dog knows it, Molly continued. And the friends laughed. 2 weeks after this conversation, Molly flew to Italy, and Angelina packed her things for departure to the regional center. There were more people and opportunities there. Arriving in the big city, the girl was very confused. She was not ready for so many people and competition in her work. In addition, she had not thought about where to stay for the night. After walking around the city, she found a small hotel. Thankfully, she had saved up some money over the past few years. And for the first time, she had it. She rented a room for a day and decided to start looking for a flat or a room in the morning, and then a job. In the morning, she called several advertisements and, having realized that it would be expensive to rent a flat, started looking for a room. Finding a good room with a female neighbor proved to be problematic. Either there were adverts of girl students who, of course, have a stormy personal life and parties, or grandfathers. Angelina walked through the city and didn't know what to do. She sat down on a bench and cried. She felt so sorry for herself. What kind of life do I have? Angelina thought. I don't even have anyone to turn to for advice. Suddenly, someone touched her shoulder. Baby, why are you crying? Who hurt you? Angelina heard a pleasant female voice. She looked up and saw a nice grandmother of about 75 years old, no more. For some reason, the grandmother aroused Angelina's trust, and she told her problems without a second thought. Wow, what happiness, exclaimed the grandmother. I'm looking for a roommate, a lodger. I don't want to take students there, too noisy. But someone like you, calm and kind, I'd love to have you as my neighbor. I have a big 3-room flat. There's plenty of room for everyone, but I have another tenant. I don't know how you feel about him. Angelina tensed up. She didn't want a man living in the flat. Is he related to you? More than that. This is my cat, Sam. Granny smiled. We've lived together for 9 years, and my name is Kimberly. So will you come and live with me? Of course I will, Angelina said happily. Well, what's your name? Oh, my name is Angelina. What kind of name is unusual for you? No, it's a normal name, Angelina. I just haven't liked it since I was a kid. I came up with a shortened form of it that works for me. I see. I had a friend named Angela, and she used to tell everyone she was Ange. All right, give me a piece of paper and a pen. I'll write down my address. Pick up your stuff from the hotel and come home tonight. The words "come home tonight" made Angelina feel suddenly warm and peaceful. It felt as if it was her own grandmother, with whom she had quarreled, but now she had made up, and her grandmother was waiting for her at home. Angelina had never had a grandmother of her own. She died before her granddaughter was born. And her grandfather, her mum's father, died when she was 2 years old, and she hardly remembered him, only from photographs. After picking up her things from the hotel, Angelina hailed a taxi and drove to the address. Kimberly greeted Angelina like a dear guest. She set the table, baked a cake, prepared the room, and laid out new bed linen. For some reason, Angelina really felt at home. She felt very comfortable and warm in this strange flat with a complete stranger. She did not feel so calm and good even at home, in the company of her own mother. And Angelina stayed with Grandma Kimberly for many years. Angelina's memory was interrupted by her grandmother's familiar voice. "Baby, I need to remind you that I have blood pressure. I can't be so worried. Where did you run off to so suddenly? What happened?" Angelina looked at Kimberly. The look of a dog that's been punished and kicked out into the street. "Grandma, Kimberly, you were right. He's a traitor. He doesn't want the baby or me. He told me to have an abortion. That's the only way he'd come back to me." "He's such an arsehole," Grandma scolded. "I hope you won't do something stupid like that." "Of course not. I'm 28. What abortion? For what and for whom should I get rid of my own child? I guess I'll be like my mother. I'll raise him alone. You know, it's better to be alone than with such an unreliable boyfriend. It's all right, we'll manage together. I can still help you with the little one. I don't have grandchildren of my own. I'll babysit your baby." Angelina knew that Kimberly had a son who had died in the line of duty at the age of 30. He'd been married, but never had children. The former daughter-in-law sometimes visited her former mother-in-law, but not often. She had another family and children. Kimberly sat down next to Angelina on the bench. "You know, I'd rather he found out he was a scoundrel now than when you two got married. I get it, but it's just so hurtful and hurtful. You were right when you said he wasn't right for me. Grandma Kimberly, am I ever going to have a date?" "Of course you will. I'm sure you will." "Somehow I believe you," Angelina said, and added quietly, "or want to believe. Let's go home, baby. It's cold. You can't be cold tonight. Neither can I. Let's have some tea, go to bed. The morning's the wiser." They got up from the bench and walked slowly home. The next day, Angelina had a day off, and she decided to sleep. She woke up close to noon. Kimberly was in the kitchen when Angelina came out. "Baby, you just woke up. Go to the bathroom while I make you breakfast." "I don't want breakfast. I'm just going to have some coffee, that's all." "No, that's no good. You need to have a proper breakfast. I made cottage cheese casserole. You're forgetting that you need to eat for two and not coffee and sandwiches." "Right. I'm still getting used to my new status." "Thank you, Grandma." Over breakfast, Grandma asked Angelina about her plans for the near future. "Have you thought about changing jobs? Working in a warehouse is not a good option for pregnant women. You need something quieter, less physically demanding. What did the gynecologist say? Are you okay?" "Basically, yeah, but a little tonus, no heavy lifting." "Well, you see, that means we have to think of something. What do you want to do before your maternity leave?" "I understand. But where can I go? I don't have any education. I've only worked as a delivery boy, and a storekeeper isn't the right job for me right now." "What else can you do?" "I used to sell at the market, but it was a bad experience. I also took hairdressing courses, but it was a long time ago and I have no experience at all. It doesn't fit." "Well, that's it then. I can't do anything else." "Yeah, that's it," Kimberly said. "Well, don't worry, we'll figure something out." After breakfast, Angelina decided to take a walk and go to the temple. She wasn't a deeply religious person, but sometimes she went to pray and ask for help or a clue as to what to do next. After placing a candle for her mother's repose and Kimberly's health, she walked out of the temple and came across a taxi car at the entrance. The sign on the car was brightly colored and eye-catching ladies' taxi, and Angelina was electrocuted. "That's genius. I know how to drive and I have a license and about 4 years' experience. It's not hard work. You can try it for the first time as long as your stomach doesn't rest against the steering wheel." She approached the girl behind the wheel. "Excuse me, but is it realistic to work for your firm? Do you have any driving experience?" "Yes, almost 4 years." "Can you prove it?" Yes, I have a record in my employment record. Then no problem. And the girl handed Angelina a business card. Call the bottom phone number and tell them you're interested in the driver's position. We're just recruiting a team. Thank you very much. Angelina was delighted. She stepped aside and dialed the right number. A pleasant female voice confirmed that there was a vacancy and gave Angelina an appointment with the manager for tomorrow at 10. Satisfied, Angelina immediately ran home to share the news with Kimberly. Kimberly wasn't too happy about this venture, as the job of a driver only seems easy. It's actually a lot of strain on the lower back, which is not good for a pregnant woman. I'm not going to work until I'm 9 months pregnant, but at least 4 or 5 months so I can save up some money. I've been saving all this time, of course, but soon I'll have to start spending it, because things will be small and then there will be nothing left. And I'll have to live with a little baby on my hands, Angelina argued. Kimberly agreed. The taxi interview was successful and Angelina was hired. The girl was happy. The first shift in her new role was scheduled for tomorrow. Angelina was very nervous on the first day. She wanted to be very polite and wished all the passengers a good day, good luck, or a pleasant evening. Someone left a tip, someone looked surprised, but there was no negativity. And that pleased Angelina most of all. A month went by like that. Then another. Angelina's stomach began to round out. Angelina's stomach began to round, and she was worried that her bosses would notice and fire her. And she loved her job as a taxi driver. This morning, Angelina had a strange mood or feeling. She didn't understand. It was as if something was going to happen. She told Kimberly about it. She smiled in return. You're just becoming a mum. It's normal for a mum. Don't worry, everything will be fine, she reassured Angelina. But the uneasy feeling didn't leave Angelina. And then there's this weird order. They gave me to pick up a client from one address and take him to a distant neighborhood where taxi drivers didn't like to go because it was considered to be dysfunctional and criminal. Maybe it's this order that's giving me this feeling. Angelina worried as she drove up to the address. A woman approached the car and opened the front door. Angelina didn't like it when passengers sat next to her. She was a little uncomfortable, but the girl could not say anything. The customer was always right. The woman looked quite strange. A long dress, a hoodie of some strange color, strange bracelets on her hands and beads on her neck. Lots of rings on her fingers. She looked a bit like a gypsy, but it was clearly not a representative of this ethnic group. Good afternoon. The woman said hello. Her voice was incredibly pleasant and even mesmerizing, and her gaze was heavy and penetrating. Hello, please sit down and fasten your seatbelt, Angelina said politely. The woman obediently fastened her seatbelt. Aren't you afraid to drive like that? The passenger suddenly asked. It's not the best job in your condition. In what position? Angelina pretended not to understand. You think you can fool me? The woman smiled. No, I just don't really know what you're talking about. Angelina stood her ground. Well, why are we ashamed of our name? Do you think it's worse than the others? That's where Angelina was really surprised. She did not believe in psychics, fortune tellers, and other miracle people. But you can't just randomly come up with something like that. I wonder what else she can say, she thought. And then she heard it. Jonathan, your Jonathan is no match for you. Good thing he left. You should have listened when Camila told you he was no good for you, the woman said. Angelina even jerked the steering wheel. She slowed down a little out of surprise and looked at her passenger with great interest. You still don't believe me? With a little squint, but with a smile, asked the woman. It's impossible not to believe. How do you know all this? I see a lot. What else do you see? Angelina lit up. And although she did not believe in predictions, but at this moment she wanted to hear something good about her future. What do you want to know? I don't know. Like, will I ever have a normal man? Am I carrying a baby, and will I have more children? Wow. How many things do you want? The good thing is that all your questions can be answered in one word. Yes. I won't go into detail. All women are curious to a greater or lesser extent. No, why not? Because life won't be interesting. You're weird. Usually fortune tellers predict with details, but you're so cryptic. I'm not a fortune teller. I'm a witch, the woman said seriously, calmly. Angelina hit the brakes in surprise. I'm sorry, who? Did you say? The passenger's calmness was astonishing. She spoke as if she were answering a question about which traffic light was the right one to drive through. I'm sorry I slowed down. I just didn't expect to hear that. What did I say to surprise you? A witch is someone who knows. I mean, she knows a lot, not Baba Yaga. But people think of witches differently. It's a mistake. What's your name? Angelina asked for some reason. Sharon. I'm Angelina, the passenger finished for the girl. Excuse me, can I ask you a question? Sure. Aren't you scared to live like this? I used to be scared, but that was a long time ago, in a previous life. But now I can't live any other way. It wouldn't be interesting. I don't think I could carry that kind of weight. Do you think God doesn't give us things we can't bear or handle? Sharon asked. Are you a believer? Angelina asked in a daze. If there is no God, demons dwell in him. And I don't make friends with those things. Angelina looked at the passenger again, but now with different eyes. Sharon was very interesting and pleasant to talk to, and she was even upset that they had only a couple of minutes to go. They drove into the street of the private sector. The atmosphere around them was really unfavorable. Do you live here? Angelina asked Sharon. No, there's a nice man who lives here who is in trouble and needs help. So maybe I should wait for you. No, that's okay. Stop by that abandoned house over there, Sharon asked. Angelina stopped. How much do I owe you? It's nothing. It's been a pleasure just chatting with you. Do you have a pen and a piece of paper? Sharon suddenly asked. Yes, right away Angelina opened the glove compartment, took out a notebook and a pen and handed it to the witch. She wrote something down. Then she tore out the sheet and folded it several times. Read it when you get home. A promise not to open it before time is good. Well, be happy and take care of yourself. The wish sounded meaningful, but not threatening. Thank you, too. Have a good day. Sharon closed the door and disappeared into the darkness of the abandoned house. Angelina barely made it to work for the rest of the day and ran home impatiently. Curiosity was tearing the girl up inside. She was so eager to read the note, she flew into the flat, threw her bag on the floor in the corridor, and took out a piece of paper from her pocket. On it was written the address, or rather the name of a small town about 150 kilometers from the regional center, and personal details Oliver's. And just below it was a note. Find this man and tell him whose daughter you are. He will help you. Angelina stared at the piece of paper and tried to figure out what it meant. She didn't understand how she would come to a stranger's house in another city and just tell him whose daughter she was from the doorstep. It looked strange and stupid, and the girl decided to seek wise advice from her grandmother. She recounted today's meeting with Sharon, what they had talked about, and the note. Kimberly listened to Angelina with great surprise. How interesting. Amazingly simple. Oh my goodness, Nana wailed. Do you think I should go there or not? I'd go. What have you got to lose? What if this man really can help you in some way? You've never heard that name before. No, it's a complete stranger to me. You can look up a person's last name on the internet. Kimberly suddenly realized. Yeah, how did I not realize that? I mean, you can type in the city. See if it comes up with something. I'm having trouble with the age thing, though. I don't know how old a person is. Angelina took the laptop, opened the search engine and typed in the city, surname, first name, and patronymic. She was immediately stunned. There was only one person in this town with that information, Kimberly's grandmother. Look who it was. She unfolded the laptop and showed her grandmother a picture of Oliver with his job title. He was the mayor of this very town. What a twist. Kimberly stretched out in surprise. How are you going to get to him? That's a good question. But why? Well, that's a problem. That's a problem. Do you want me to come with you? Grandma offered. Oh no, with your legs you'll only go to other cities to get mayors. I'll manage on my own somehow. I have the day after tomorrow off, so I'll go. The next day in the evening, lying in bed, Angelina tuned herself for the trip and tried with all her might to understand who this man was and how he could help her. She had no idea how she would get to see him and how she would tell him whose daughter she was. She ran through different scenarios in her head and laughed herself out of it. Hello, I'm Angelina, my mom is Camila. Oh, why aren't you excited? That's rubbish. Maybe we shouldn't go anywhere at all. Angelina asked herself a question. I think this Oliver is living just fine without this stunning news. Whose daughter? Why does he even need this valuable information? She fell asleep like that in thought. In the morning, a colleague came to pick her up. Angelina arranged for Maggie to drive her to the bus station early, taking a ticket for the nearest bus. Angelina sat by the window and began to think about what she should do when she arrived in the city. She had two options: go to City Hall and wait for him there, hoping he would leave the building during the day, or find his home address on the internet and wait outside his house. No, not an option. And if he gets home at night, how am I going to get back to my town then, where I'll be sleeping on the street? Pregnant is not an option at all, so that leaves only work. You mean City Hall? She arrived in town around 10 in the morning. The weather was fine, a light breeze was blowing, the sun was shining, but it wasn't hot. Angelina strolled quietly through the park near the City Hall. Suddenly she saw a girl who was heading towards the City Hall. She was dressed in a business suit and shoes with a huge stiletto heel. Angelina didn't understand what attracted her to this girl, but she stared at her intently. And then the unexpected happened. The girl twisted her foot, tripped and fell. Angelina ran to her aid. Should I call an ambulance? Are you all right? Angelina asked. I think I twisted my ankle, she said, almost crying. My mom told me not to wear such stilettos. Let me call an ambulance, Angelina insisted. No, I really don't need one. Can you help me waddle to the office? I work at the town hall. Sure, Angelina was glad to be able to get inside the building. They walked slowly to the entrance. The guard, seeing the girl, also offered to call an ambulance, but Chloe, as the name of the fallen, flatly refused. They went up to the first floor and approached the mayor's reception area. We're here. Thank you so much, Chloe thanked her savior. How can I thank you? Maybe coffee or tea? And Angelina realized that this was her chance. No, thank you. No coffee or tea. But I really need some help. I really need to get a few minutes with Oliver. I'm traveling from out of town to give him some important information. But he's a complicated man. He's a difficult man to get to. Can you help me? Angelina folded her hands in a prayer gesture and made pleading eyes. No problem, somehow too quickly agreed Chloe. Why does he accept everyone? You don't know. Our mayor is a unique leader. He is much talked about not only in our city. He has no record of personal issues. If he's in his office and he's not busy, it's easy to get an audience with him. Wow. This is the first time I've ever seen such a thing. Angelina was genuinely surprised. Yes, many people are surprised. So your request is not a problem. You would have got to see him anyway. How about some tea? Especially since Oliver's not here yet. All right. Fine. Let's have tea. Angelina, after waiting for the mayor for about 40 minutes, they were already drinking their second cup of tea when the door to the reception room opened and a very stately and solid man of about 50 entered. He looked more like an athlete, broad-shouldered, trim. It was clear that he spent a couple of hours a week in the gym. He wore a dark gray suit, a light gold shirt of an obscure shade, and a tie. Angelina looked at the face. What if she had seen him once after all? But no, this was a man she would definitely remember. With thick black hair and blue eyes untouched by gray, beautifully shaped lips. But what Angelina liked most of all was his gaze. He looked stern, but with a kind of warmth. It was unclear how this could be combined, but that was the impression this man made, looking intently at the strange girl in his waiting room. "Are you here to see me?" The voice sounded so loud and confident that Angelina even flinched. "Yes, I can, of course," when it wasn't quite comfortable. He smiled and gestured Angelina into the office. The journey to the next chair seemed exciting to Angelina. She realized that she had nothing to fear, but she was still scared. Angelina didn't even notice that she had been sitting on the chair behind the desk for a long time, and the mayor of the city was sitting opposite her and waiting patiently. Yes, he was not delicate. He obviously saw the girl's excitement and did not want to prevent her from tuning in. But he couldn't wait indefinitely for her determination either. "I'm sorry, but I have a lot to do. You could get to the point more quickly. Do you need my help?" "Go ahead, I'll write it down," Oliver said. "I'm sorry to interrupt you, and please don't be surprised. I don't understand much of what's going on, but I was told to find you and give you some information." Oliver raised his eyebrows in surprise. "I'm not sure what you're talking about. Who told you to do that? What kind of information are you supposed to give me?" Angelina thought about it for a moment and decided to be honest about what really happened. At first, the mayor looked at her with distrust and suspicion, but then with interest. And when Angelina finally said what she had come for, the mayor felt unwell and clutched his heart. "Are you sick?" Angelina was genuinely frightened. "Should I call an ambulance?" "No, I don't need an ambulance. Can I have some water, please? It'll make you feel better." Angelina brought a glass of water and stood next to the mayor. "Excuse me, please, but can you at least tell me why you're doing this? Because I've been racking my brain thinking about it." "Excuse me, how old are you?" Oliver asked me out of the blue. 28. "Why?" The mayor covered his face with his hands and laughed. "Why are you laughing?" Angelina was surprised again. But suddenly she realized he wasn't laughing. "Crying? Oh, what are you doing? What did I say? Don't cry, please. Oh my God, what a load of rubbish, honestly. If I had known that I would bring this respectable uncle to tears, I wouldn't have come here at all," she thought. The mayor calmed down a little and looked at Angelina with a different look, as if he were studying her. "Can you explain anything to me?" "I don't understand anything," Oliver said. Angelina added, "I can't worry, I'm pregnant." "I can't worry, I'm pregnant." Oliver stood up and hovered over Angelina. Hovering because Angelina was 168 centimeters tall and the mayor was clearly over 185. "Your name is Angelina. That's a beautiful name. You're pregnant. Do you have a husband? When your mom died, was she ill or sudden death? Where did you live? How was your childhood? Was mom married? Is your grandfather still alive?" The questions came one after another. Oliver addressed the girl as you or you. It was obvious that he was very worried. "Oh my God, I have a daughter. I can't believe it. And I have a grandchild on the way," he said. Angelina went numb. "Father? That's my father? It can't be," she thought. The girl didn't know how to react. On the one hand, she now had a family man. On the other, he had betrayed her many years ago when he abandoned her mother. But Angelina, unlike many women, was not impulsive and always guided by logic and common sense. Therefore, she decided to first listen to her father's version of her birth, and then decide whether to communicate with him or not, though it was clear from his reaction that he was delighted with the news. "Excuse me, if you're so happy, why did you leave my mother when you found out she was pregnant?" Angelina asked. This question was particularly painful considering that she had also been abandoned recently when she found out she was pregnant. "I didn't abandon your mum. What's more, I didn't even know she was pregnant. If you give me a chance, I'll tell you everything and explain everything," Oliver replied. "Of course, I'd really like to hear from you what happened all those years ago and why you broke up. No matter how many times I asked my mother about you, she never told me anything," Angelina said. "Then you tell me." Oliver walked to the door and turned to the secretary. Chloe, I'm not here for anyone today." Then he returned to the table and sat down opposite Angelina, as if deciding where to begin his story. "I met Camilla 29 years ago at a holiday resort. I had just graduated from university, and my parents gave me a trip to the sea. Camilla was on holiday with her parents. I noticed her on the beach, but did not dare to approach her, as I saw that she was with her parents. In the evening, she came to the dance without an escort. So I asked her to dance. We got to know each other, got to talking. It turned out that we have a lot of common themes and interests, and we went for a walk to the night sea. We parted in the morning. We didn't have anything, we just sat on the beach and talked. But when she went back to her room, I realized I was in love. I'd never felt like that before. Your mom was a very beautiful woman. Not just outwardly, but probably more beautiful in spirit. She had an incredible inner world. She sounded like she was singing. It's impossible not to fall in love with such a woman. We met on the beach in the afternoon. We exchanged a few words and agreed to go to the cinema in the evening. Camilla said that she had been punished for coming back late, and that she would have to come back early today. I was a little surprised by this kind of control, as she was already 20 years old. Quite a mature girl, but she was afraid of her parents, especially her father. You could tell. We did go to the cinema in the evening. I don't know what she told them, but her parents let her go. After the cinema, we went to the beach again. That's when I kissed her for the first time and realized I was lost. I didn't know what to do. Asking for the hand of a girl you'd known for 2 days would be ridiculous and stupid. No one would believe in the sincerity of my feelings and intentions. But they were, both feelings and intentions. We sat on the beach until 2 a.m. and I walked her back to her room. The next day, Camilla was not on the beach, nor did she appear in the dining room for dinner. I noticed that Camilla's mother had taken her portion with her. I thought she was ill. The change of climate, the cool nights, so I decided to visit her. I went to their room and knocked. The door was opened by her mother, and she asked me in a disgruntled tone what I wanted. "I can honestly say that we met recently and I like your daughter," I said. "I noticed she wasn't here, so I came over to see if she was okay. Maybe she was ill." To which I received a very specific answer. "It's none of your business what's wrong with our daughter. The frown and other young ladies young man did not raise for you." Slammed the door in your face. I wasn't prepared for that attitude. I'll be honest, I was surprised by the behavior of parents, such a rigid framework in relation to an adult, which was already Camilla. 2 more days passed. Camilla finally showed up on the beach, but she was different. It was as if she'd been replaced. Even the sparkle in her eyes was gone. I had to talk to her. I got a boy about 9 years old to carefully hand her a note that said, "I'll be waiting for you tonight." Camilla arrived almost an hour late, but I would wait until morning. To be honest, I was really looking forward to this conversation and wanted to find out what was going on. "Oliver, I can't explain everything to you because it's hard for a normal person to understand," she began. "And you and I can never be together." "Why don't you like me?" I asked Camilla. "I like you. I like you a lot. But my father doesn't like you. He doesn't like you very much. And I would never go against my father's wishes." Oh my God, what is this medieval stuff? I wondered. "Do you really let me decide for you who you should live with and marry?" "I don't want to, and I won't discuss it with you," Camilla cut her off. "I'm sorry, but I really can never be with you," Camilla said, crying. I could see that she was crying from resentment and despair, from this wild injustice and stupidity. I put my arm round her shoulders, and suddenly she turned her head and kissed me on the lips, really, and with such desire that I couldn't resist. And it happened. It was the first and only time. I never saw her again. In the morning, when I got to the beach, they were gone. Then I found out they'd left at dawn. Apparently as soon as Camilla got back to her room, because we didn't break up until the morning. That was the story Oliver sighed. I wanted to find her. I knew her last name and the city she came from, but I didn't dare. A year or so later, I happened to be in that town, and I even found her address and went to see her. But my father opened the door and just threw me down the stairs, said he'd kill me next time. Angelina listened with bated breath. That her grandfather was strict and tough, she knew, and from her mother's words. But to be so. But that her mother had broken, that was obvious. Knowing the whole story now, Angelina understood why her mother had become so callous and rude. She felt sorry for her. But why did she do that to me, then Angelina wondered. Why, on the contrary, did she keep me away from her and behave to me as her parents did to her? She must have understood, as no one else could, how hurt and offended I was. But apparently the pressure that she has experienced all her life squeezed out of her all the good that still remained in her soul in her youth. "Are you married?" Angelina asked Oliver. "No," he answered. "I've been going through this love for a long time, trying to forget Camilla. Then I went out with other girls, but it wasn't the same. Emptiness in my soul. I'm so used to being alone that I don't care anymore. But your appearance in my life is a breath of fresh air, a ray of sunshine in a dark kingdom," Oliver said. "I don't know what other epithets to use in honor of your arrival. And with a grandson, jackpot, as the young people say. I'm really glad I have you now. Tell me about yourself, please. Where do you live? What do you do? Do you have a boyfriend? I'm interested in everything." And Angelina told her father everything she remembered about her childhood, about her relationship with her mother, which could hardly be called warm, about her illness, death, about moving to another city, failed relationship with Jonathan, and about the brightest and wisest person, Kimberly. "I want you to live with me," Oliver said. "There's so much to catch up on. I can't leave Kimberly. She doesn't have anyone else but me, you know. Let's use the first name. It's not like I'm a stranger to you. As far as Kimberly's concerned, I wouldn't mind if you came with her. It's more fun that way." Angelina looked at her father in surprise. "So she's a complete stranger to you. She helped you in your time of need and supported you. So I'm grateful to her too. Well, it's settled. You're moving in with me." Angelina suddenly remembered the first time she'd met Kimberly and decided to make the same joke. "There's just one problem besides Kimberly and me. There's another mate." "Who?" "The cat." Angelina smiled. "And that's as much as you want. You can have a dog, too. I have a big house. There's plenty of room for everyone. I'll have to go to my town to get my things and explain everything to Grandma. Prepare her somehow." "Sure, I understand. But let's do it this way. Tonight you'll stay at my place. And tomorrow Thomas will take you to get your things and your grandmother." "Okay," Angelina smiled. She wanted to be with her father again, to talk to her family. Oliver and Angelina left the office. The secretary looked at Angelina with interest. She didn't understand who this girl was and why the mayor had canceled all his meetings and appointments for her sake. They went to a restaurant to have lunch and continue their acquaintance over conversation. Oliver asked Angelina about her tastes, hobbies, favorite foods, books, and films. It was as if the father had decided to find out everything he could about his daughter in one day. Angelina answered and asked counter questions. She was also interested to know something about her father. Their conversation was interrupted by a phone call. The number was unknown. Angelina initially wanted not to answer, but then decided to pick up the phone. What if it was from her new job? "Hello, are you Angelina?" She heard an unfamiliar female voice. "Yes, who is it?" For some reason, the girl was frightened. "It's the doctor from the hospital where Jonathan is now. Do you know this man?" "Yes, I do. Do you want to know what happened to him?" A woman's voice asked sternly. Wondering what happened to him. Angelina was puzzled. They'd broken up. Why are they calling her? He has parents. They live in another city, but still he has someone to call. "He was in a car accident and asked me to call you." "What about him?" Angelina asked. "He's in serious condition. Can you come to the hospital today?" "No, I'm in another city. I can't physically get there today. I will come tomorrow morning." Angelina checked the number of the hospital and that Jonathan was in the intensive care unit, not the ward. "Was something wrong?" Oliver asked. "Do you need help?" I don't even know how to act or what to say." Angelina explained the situation. "I think you should go and visit the man." I'm not saying you have to forgive him and sit in his room. Absolutely not. But you should go and see him. You've been in a relationship for 2 years, so he's not a stranger to you. Yes, you're right, Dad. Angelina called him Dad for the first time, and Oliver had tears in his eyes. It was so surprising. Such a serious grown man was so sensitive. Thank you, the father said, and took his daughter's hand. For what? Angelina didn't understand. For calling me Daddy. They left the restaurant and drove to his house. The mayor's house stood out among the other private properties. Angelina looked curiously at the huge house, which looked more like a castle. Oliver caught her gaze and realized what she was thinking. Don't look at it because it's so big. I used to have a construction business. I built this house before I got into politics, so it's fair and legal. I didn't think anything of the sort. Angelina felt embarrassed because that was what she had thought at first. All right, her father smiled and pretended to believe her. Angelina entered the house and was stunned. She had never seen such beauty, except in the cinema. Everything was competently and originally organized. It was obvious that a very good designer had worked here and thought over every detail of the house. Angelina walked around and looked at the furniture, paintings, statuettes, vases, crockery. She was very interested. Come on, I'll show you your room, Oliver said. They went up to the first floor. There were several doors. One of them led to a room. The father opened the door and gestured for his daughter to come in. The room was decorated in a soft green color. It was so delicate, barely noticeable, and incredibly pleasing to the eyes. In the center of the room stood a huge bed. Along the wall was a snow-white wardrobe. On either side of the bed were the same white-colored nightstands, and on them stood small lamps. Everything was so beautiful, so perfectly clean and shiny that Angelina was afraid to touch it all, lest it get dirty and leave marks. Her father looked at her and smiled. He understood perfectly well in what conditions his daughter had grown up, and now by all means he wanted to compensate her for all the emotions she had not received and provide her with a decent standard of living. "Do you want to rest?" Oliver asked. "Honestly, I do. It was only when I saw the bed that I realized I was tired," Angelina admitted. "Then rest. I'll go make dinner arrangements. What can I make you? Fish meat." "Oh, I'd love some fish. I really like fish." "That's great. And fish is very good for pregnancy. I'm going to go and you rest." As soon as her father closed the door, Angelina lay down on the bed, and in a matter of minutes she passed out. She was really tired today. At dinner, her father told Angelina that his driver Thomas would arrive at 8 tomorrow morning and take Angelina first to the hospital, then to Kimberly's flat. Then he would bring them back with the cat and Grandma. "Oh, I'm sorry to burden you like this, to be honest," Angelina said. "What do you mean, burden me? I'm your father, and it's my duty to take care of my daughter." Especially in a situation like this, he was quiet for a moment and added, "Let's make a deal. If you need anything, you tell me straight away." He took a bank card out of his pocket and put it in front of his daughter. "This is your card. There will always be money on it. And don't you dare argue, it's useless. The PIN code is your mom's date and month of birth." "I've got the money." "Thanks, Dad. No need," Angelina tried to refuse. "That's my girl. You don't think I'm going to let you work in your condition. And girls always need money for stuff. Also, take only your most precious and essentials, and we'll buy everything else here. Kimberly, too." "Thank you. But I think I'm a darling." "I think you think, and I think we've agreed it's useless to argue with me. I suggest we take a walk before we go to bed and get some rest. You have a busy day tomorrow. You need a good night's sleep." They walked round the garden, walked down the avenue, sat on a bench for a while, and returned to the house. Angelina said goodnight to her father and went up to her room. Before she went to take a shower, she dialed Kimberly. "Baby, how are you doing in there? How is your father taking you?" Angelina had already called Kimberly in the afternoon and told her about her parents' wonderful find, which Kimberly was glad about. "It's fine, Grandma. I have 2 pieces of news for you." "The good news and the bad news?" Grandma asked and smiled. No, both good, you just don't worry. Okay? Angelina asked. So to begin with, it's usually after you say that you have to worry. Dad wants me to come and live with him. That's really good news and absolutely the right decision. You should live with your dad. What's the other news? Grandma, Kimberly, I really want you to come with me. Please, 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 please. Daddy personally invites you to come live with us. He doesn't want to leave you alone. There was silence on the phone. Angelina was afraid for Grandma and shouted, Grandma, are you all right? Yes, Kimberly answered through her tears. It was only now that Angelina realized she was crying. Why are you crying? Why are you crying? I'm not leaving you. On the contrary, I want you to come with me. You're coming. Okay. Thank you, baby. But I don't think it's a good idea. I'm a stranger to you, especially to your father. Why would you want me as a burden? Oh, how can you say that? What burden? You're very much my own person. You practically saved me. I can't leave you. And I'm not going either. Okay, I'll think about it till tomorrow. You're coming tomorrow, right? Yes, I'll come to see you. The hospital called. Jonathan had an accident and gave the doctors my number for some reason. I'll have to pop round to the hospital and see what's going on. And then I'll come straight to your place to pack. Okay, baby. Well, good night, and I'll see you tomorrow. Good night. Shh. Angelina showered, went to bed, and fell asleep with a happy smile on her face. In the morning after breakfast, Angelina got ready for the road. Annie, her father's au pair, made her sandwiches, put biscuits and water in a small basket. Take these in case you want a snack on the road. You can't go hungry, she said thoughtfully. Thank you very much, Angelina said. Angelina and her father went outside just as the car pulled up. Thomas, her father's driver, got out. Angelina saw him and froze in place. He looked incredibly like her favorite actor. Come on, it doesn't work that way for such a handsome man to work as a simple driver, she thought, and quietly asked her father. Is this your driver? Yes, but Thomas is not just a driver, he's also a security guard. He's a master of sports in Sambo. There was a small injury, and he had to retire from professional sports. He's a very nice and educated guy. When you talk to him, you'll understand, Oliver replied. How interesting. Angelina said with burning eyes. Thomas, I trust you with the most precious thing in life, my daughter. Keep an eye on her, you answer with your head. Oliver said in a serious tone. You have a daughter? That's the first I've heard of it, Thomas said in surprise. You wouldn't believe it, I just found out yesterday. You see how miracles happen in life. Don't you believe in miracles? Oliver smiled and repeated, don't drive. Drive carefully, as if you had a crystal vase in the car. Don't worry, everything will be fine, the driver assured her, and took a small basket of groceries from Angelina's hands. Angelina hugged and kissed her father and got into the car. For the first 10 minutes they drove in silence. Angelina felt uncomfortable because Thomas looked so much like a famous actor, and she was embarrassed to even look at him. Thomas looked at the road and waited for his valued passenger to want to talk. If she didn't, then so be it. Angelina made up her mind and spoke first. Thomas, do you know that you look like the actor Thomas Clinton? And Thomas laughed. How do I look like him? Except for the name. And very much like him, Angelina insisted. And she was right, he did look incredibly like this actor. Do you like the actor Thomas Clinton? Thomas realized. And how can not like him, when he is so handsome and incredibly charming? And in every role. Have you seen any of his films? Honestly, I don't remember. I don't really remember actors. Bad memory? No, I just remember actresses better, Thomas smiled. I'm a normal man. I like women. Angelina blushed deep red with embarrassment and even felt a pang of jealousy. And for some reason she felt uncomfortable that Thomas had said that. Angelina, are you a film buff? Why not? I just love our films and serials. I don't watch foreign ones at all. And I have a good memory, so I remember the actors I like and enjoy watching. What do you do besides watching films? I live. I work. Are you married? Unexpectedly, he asked, and Angelina blushed again. Why? He asked. What does he care? Thought the girl. Why? Is it something you're interested in? Maybe I'm looking for a bride. And you're just my type. I like smart, interesting, and terribly modest girls who, when you ask them something, they immediately blush from head to toe. Angelina blushed even more and turned away to the window. Really? She asked, embarrassed, continuing to stare out the window. Excuse me, who are you talking to over there? And they both laughed. If you're asking seriously, I'm no match for you, Angelina replied sadly. May I ask why you are pregnant and what? Thomas asked. But then he realized, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize it first. You have a fiancé and you're getting married? Then yes, I'll pass. I'm not interested in other people's brides. No, I don't have a fiancé. Then why don't you suit me? Because I'm pregnant with another man's child, Angelina said reasonably. And you don't think your child needs a father? I suppose I do. But not every man will agree to raise another man's child. I agree, not every man would. But I'm not everyone. I'm unique. He smiled sincerely and winked at Angelina, which made her blush again. Angelina looked at Thomas questioningly, trying to understand whether he was joking or serious. Are you joking? I don't think this is a joke, Angelina said. No, I'm not joking. You're an incredible girl, I can tell. And you have a special energy that affects me. I've never felt this kind of emotion before. How old are you, Thomas? Angelina asked. Does it matter? Yes. I'm 34. 34, Angelina was surprised. For some reason, she had thought he was no more than 25. Not badly preserved. Yes, Thomas joked again. Angelina liked his sense of humor very much. It was peculiar, of course, but subtle and original. Rather the opposite, too good. I thought you were no more than 25, the girl said honestly. Come on, really? Yeah, it's great. It's probably because of my resemblance to Konstantinov, Thomas joked again. And they both laughed. Angelina didn't notice how they arrived in the city. She enjoyed talking to Thomas so much that she didn't want to part. She gave him the address of the hospital and told him to stop by there first. As Angelina got out of the car, she suddenly yelped and clutched her stomach. What's wrong? Are you ill? Thomas was frightened. There's no doctor. I think the baby moved, Angelina smiled. It's the first time. Yes? Can you imagine how good it feels? You can see what an important moment I'm witnessing. And you say the baby is a stranger. Can I touch it? He asked, and without waiting for an answer, reached out his hand to Angelina's belly. Yes, Angelina said, and was embarrassed again. But the baby was quiet and Thomas didn't feel anything. Don't be upset. The first time is always like this, I've read. The bigger the belly gets, the more often and better it will feel. You have given me hope now, Thomas smiled. Angelina smiled back, but said nothing. She really liked Thomas, but the possibility of them being together seemed very remote. I won't be long. Please wait for me in the car, Angelina asked, and walked towards the hospital. She easily found the intensive care unit and learnt that Jonathan had been transferred to the ICU. Can I visit him? She asked the doctor. Yes, you can. I'll take you there. Angelina entered the room, which was empty except for Jonathan. He was lying against the wall and staring at the ceiling, but when he saw Angelina, he became animated and even happy. He had fractures in his arm and leg on his right side. There was a large abrasion and bruise on his face. Hey, Jonathan, what happened? Angelina asked and sat down next to him on a chair. Hello, darling. It's so good to see you. Jonathan said almost sincerely. Don't ask me what happened. We were in such a mess with Andrew. Is he alive? He's alive, but he's worse than I am. He's got a problem with his spine. That's too bad. I'm sorry, what about you? Fractured arm, leg, and some other problem with my foot. We need to operate right away. I see. How are you doing? How are you doing without me? I'm fine. I live. I work. Do you miss me? Jonathan asked hopefully. Not anymore. I'm used to it. Or rather, I'm used to you. You hurt me too much. I'm sorry, please. Angelina wondered, did he really want them to be together again, and was he ready to raise a child with her? Maybe the accident had changed his outlook, and now he would ask her to marry him. But the reality turned out to be completely different, and what Angelina later heard shocked her. I'm sorry to you, of course, but you haven't exactly been fair to me either. I told you I didn't want kids, and now, surprise, surprise, I'm pregnant. How am I supposed to react? I don't understand. Are you apologizing or blaming me? Angelina clarified. Apologizing in a very peculiar way, I must say. I need your help, obviously. I need money urgently, and a lot of it I have to have an operation. My parents don't have that kind of money. And I just bought a car. I don't have any money either, Jonathan said. I don't have any either. Don't you know that? You have a flat and you can sell it. Angelina hadn't expected such insolence. I'm sorry, I have to sell my flat and pay for your operation. Did I get that right? She wondered. Yes, we are not strangers, and we should help each other in a difficult situation. And I have a very difficult situation, and I have no one else to turn to. Don't you think that's a bit much? No, I don't. Did you have an abortion? No, of course not. Okay, so you're carrying my baby, and in order for it to be yours, you have to pay me as a donor because you fraudulently obtained my material. I didn't give my consent. You owe me a favor. Angelina was numb. She was prepared to hear anything, but something like this. She was so dumbfounded that she didn't know what to say. After recovering a little from the shock, she asked, "Tell me, did you hit your head in the accident? Did you have a neurologist look at it?" No, there's nothing wrong with my head. That's a very controversial conclusion because you're sick. Not a penny, you hear me? Not a penny you're getting from me. I thought you really wanted to apologize and raise our child with me. I was even prepared to ask my father for help. But after what I've heard, don't even get your hopes up. She got up from her chair, walked to the door, turned round and said, "Don't you ever dare call me again or come within a kilometer of me, or my father will." You, my future husband. Angelina smiled enigmatically. Get well, sweetheart. She turned round and with her head proudly raised left the room. In fact, the girl could hardly hold back her tears. But when she left the hospital, she did cry. Thomas waited patiently by the car. When he saw Angelina crying, he rushed to her. What's wrong? Did someone hurt you? Did something bad happen? Thomas asked worriedly. No, nothing happened. It's just that my past is worse than I thought it would be. So much worse that I feel like taking a shower right now. Like I'm covered in mud, Angelina said. Maybe we should talk to someone ... without fists. Just man to man, Thomas suggested. No, we don't. There's no use talking. It's a very bad case. Let's go home. To your father's house or to the flat? The flat, of course. We have to pack and pick up Grandma. Angelina asked Thomas to go up to the flat with her to help her carry her things out. Since she can't lift heavy things, much less Grandma. Kimberly was baking pies. The smell could be heard even in the entryway. Grandma was making pies. She's such a good cook, said Angelina and opened the door with her key. Grandma Kimberly, I'm here. Baby, finally. What took you so long? Kimberly came out of the kitchen and saw Thomas. She gave him a sharp look and nodded approvingly. Now that's what I'm talking about. A real man, reliable, worthwhile, not like some of the others. Angelina smiled. So he's worthwhile and reliable. That's good. For some reason, she was very pleased to hear that, as if she had brought her fiancé to introduce her grandmother. "Grandma, why are you making pies?" "We have to go," Angelina argued. "How? I've already done everything, and we'll have something to eat on the road." "Did you pack your things quietly, baby?" "I'm not going. What do you need me for?" "An old, sick man. Your father's probably glad he's got a daughter now, and then he'll kick me out and I'll be on the street. I'd rather live out my days here. So, here's the deal. 1. If you're not going, I'm not going. 2. My father's a normal man, and he's smart, judging by his position. And he thought about it before he said it. And 3. I will never let anyone kick you out on the street." "How could you think that about my father? How could such a bad man give birth to a good girl like me?" Thomas commented modestly and smiled. The women laughed. "We have another hour to pack, so we don't have to drive at night. Then we take only the most valuable, expensive and necessary things to Grandma. Dad said we'll buy everything we need later," Angelina said. "I'm so embarrassed, so uncomfortable," Kimberly wailed as she gathered her things. An hour later, they were ready to leave. All they had to do was drop off the keys to their neighbor and arrange for her to water the flowers. From time to time, Sam the cat looked after the flat. He was put in a carrier and meowed at the whole entrance. He really didn't like to go outside. By 8 o'clock, they were home. Oliver met them at the gate. Kimberly was very worried, but Angelina's father turned out to be a really nice man and a warm host. He gave her grandmother a room on the ground floor so she wouldn't have to run up and down the stairs every day. The room was next to the library, which was a real gift to Kimberly. She read a lot, despite her age and deteriorating eyesight. Sam the cat was let out in the middle of the living room and proudly walked around his new domain. Oliver wanted to let Thomas go home, but Angelina insisted he stay with them for dinner. "Daddy, can I have a word with you?" She turned to her father. Sure, they stepped aside and Angelina asked, "Say, and if suddenly I want to marry, you will not object?" "Did the baby's father come to his senses and propose to you?" "No, but you've been to see him. Maybe you need some help. Should I get involved?" "Angelina, I realize you've broken up, but you have to stay human and help even your exes in difficult situations." Angelina looked at her father, wondering whether to tell him what Jonathan had said. But after thinking about it, she decided to tell him. Oliver was angry at first, then laughed. God, how impoverished the male species had become. What kind of a man would have to be to think of such a thing? What a nightmare. "Yeah, Dad, I'm shocked too." "So wait, then who are you going to marry? Or is there something else I don't know?" Oliver asked. "You remember the story of how you and Mum met, don't you? I think I'm in a similar situation. I just feel like he's my man." And he said he was looking for someone like me. It's amazing how history has a way of repeating itself. "Are you sure he's a good man?" Dad asked. "Will you introduce us before the wedding?" "Dad, don't you worry." Angelina paused for a moment, took a breath of air in her chest and blurted out, "It's Thomas." Oliver looked at his daughter in surprise, then looked at his driver, who was stroking Sam's cat and talking to Kimberly. Then he turned to Angelina again. "When did you two get to know each other so well to make such a life-changing decision?" "I'm telling you, I just feel it. He's very nice. Would you allow it?" Angelina asked. "Why should I forbid it?" Oliver didn't understand. "Well, he's just a driver. What if you say it's indecent or something?" "What?" "I'm the mayor of the city. My daughter is marrying a driver, reputation and so on, Dad." "I don't care about reputation and stuff like that. All I care about is that you're happy, you know, and a reliable man to rely on in times of need, who won't betray you and who'll give you a shoulder to lean on. Thomas is like that. I'd be very happy if you two were together." Oliver was silent, weighing each word so as not to offend or upset his daughter. "He knows I'm pregnant," Angelina realized. "Good." They went back to the others. Angelina wanted to go for a walk before dinner, so Thomas volunteered to escort her. Kimberly and Oliver looked at each other and smiled. "Thomas, can I ask you a question?" Angelina asked as they walked away. Of course you're allowed to do anything, Thomas smiled. Why? Because you are my future wife. You can't keep secrets from your wife, he replied. You're not joking, are you? No, I'm not joking about that sort of thing. Then I agree. And she reached out to kiss him first. After dinner, Thomas went home and the tenants went to their rooms. Angelina lay down and was about to switch off her headphones when the phone rang. At first she wanted to switch it off, thinking it was Jonathan calling again. But it turned out to be Molly. They rarely called each other, and her friend didn't know how much had happened in Angelina's life. "Hello, darling, how are you?" Molly shouted happily into the phone. "Hi. I'm so glad to hear from you. I have so much news. But first tell me how you are. Are you coming to visit soon?" "We're coming in a month, but not for a while. Thomas has some firm issues to sort out and we'll be back. He's been offered an open-ended contract, so we're staying in Italy. And another thing." Molly was silent. She loved that kind of effect. "I'm going to be a mum soon." "Oh, come on. When are you due?" "April." "I'm due in February," Angelina said. "I'm sorry, what? You're pregnant? When was the wedding? Why didn't you invite me, your friend?" "Calm down, the wedding's still to come. Hey, how did you talk Jonathan into having a baby? I thought he was against it, wasn't he?" "He still is. I'm not marrying him." "Wow, that's quite a personal life you've got going on. Well, tell me about it. I'm interested. Or do you want me to burst with curiosity and my husband to become a widower?" So Angelina told her friend about the pregnancy and the breakup with Jonathan and the wonderful meeting with Sharon and then her father. "You know, I love Thomas. You know, my meeting him is like meeting my parents. How is that possible? But I'm just sure he's my man. Do you want to laugh some more?" Angelina asked. "Go ahead, but it will be hard for you to surprise me or make me laugh now after all I've heard. Do you remember which actor I really like?" "You bet. A good-looking guy like Bradley Cooper. Not only you, but most of the female population likes him. What's he got to do with it? What are you suggesting? Are you marrying him? Isn't he Thomas too?" "No, of course not. Where am I and where is he? But my Thomas is exactly like him. You'll be amazed when you see him." "I already am," said Molly. "Mate, life has turned you around in a way that's worse than in the cinema. And you didn't believe it could happen in real life?" "No, Molly, now I do." They chatted some more and said goodbye, agreeing to meet at the next visit of Thomas's family. Angelina thought it would be necessary to set a wedding date just a month in time for their arrival. As she dreamed of her future, she fell asleep. A wedding, the birth of her son Andrew, and a happy married life with her beloved husband in her own father's home, and under the wise protection of her grandmother Kimberly lay ahead of her. She'll go for milk and will throw her stuff away. Margaret accidentally overhears her daughter-in-law talking to her son. Margaret was born and raised in a rural family. Her mother worked on the farm all her life. Her father worked as a driver. Margaret and her little sister Vanessa cleaned the house, cooked and looked after the livestock from a young age. Their parents had no time for work. They earned money. In the evening they would come home tired and their daughters would look after them. They would set the table, pour tea, and bring clean towels after washing. It was the order of the day. From childhood, Margaret dreamed of becoming a teacher. Perhaps her first teacher played a big role in this. She was a beautiful, very intelligent young girl who had barely graduated from the institute. She spoke intelligently and calmly, knew the answers to all the questions and skillfully motivated the class for successful study. She had no laggards. Even the weakest tried and stretched to please. Gwen. Margaret remembered how she had sobbed when her favorite teacher's practice was over and she had gone home. And she hadn't been the only one upset then. Ever since then, the girl had been determined that when she grew up she would become a teacher. As good and kind as Gwen. Margaret never changed her mind. She studied well and, having finished school, easily entered the university. Margaret was given a room in a dormitory. It was so unusual. The girl had never been away from her parents and sister for more than a couple of days. And now all of a sudden it was like this. It was scary and hard at first. But Margaret was quickly drawn in. She liked her studies, her classmates, her teachers. She realized more and more clearly that she had chosen the right path. Being a teacher was really her calling. After receiving her diploma, Margaret got her first job in her life. She was hired at the local city school and at a prestigious language gymnasium, and they offered her a salary that the young girl could never have dreamed of. Margaret plunged headlong into her work. She liked everything to teach, to answer the numerous questions of her children, to write notes for lessons, and to deal with interesting and difficult cases at the pedagogical council. The young specialist was noticed and appreciated. It was nice to receive compliments from experienced colleagues. Margaret felt really happy. Vanessa, her sister, had also moved to the city, graduated from the College of Economics, got a job at the meat processing plant in the administrative office, even got married, and very successfully. Ashley, the son of the director of the plant, fell in love with the young, pretty employee. The guy was from a wealthy family, handsome, educated, witty. Perhaps his parents were at first against the bride from the village, but after getting to know Vanessa better, they loved and accepted her. Of course they did. Beautiful, hard-working, faithful, kind, the young lived in their own flat, which had 3 spacious rooms and a huge loggia. Ashley's parents had given it to them as a wedding present. Margaret was genuinely happy for her sister. But her personal life wasn't going well. Back in her university days, Margaret had had several unsuccessful romances. They all followed the same pattern. At first, the girl began to charm the next suitor, saw him as an ideal man, mentally preparing for the wedding. Then came the epiphany, bringing heartache and almost disgust to the one who had recently been the meaning of Margaret's life. Somehow her suitors turned out to be infantile, spoiled creatures, selfish as well. Insecure, weak. No, Margaret could not commit her life to such a man. The bitterness and disappointment after each breakup was long-lasting. That's why Margaret decided to take a break. I don't care about those men. They're so frustrating. Better to get on with her career. And then, one day he came into the life of a young teacher. Andrew, a modest, even a little stiff and short guy with blue eyes and a nice smile. For the first time they saw each other in the school gym on the eve of 1st September. Andrew was leading a team of craftsmen who were hurriedly completing repairs at the school. The young men met their eyes. Margaret immediately realized that this man had something for her. She couldn't quite put her finger on it. He wasn't that handsome. Quiet, unremarkable. And he flushed to the roots of his hair at the sight of Margaret and turned away, embarrassed. It seemed very sweet and touching. Margaret realized that he liked her too at first sight. Then Margaret met Andrew every day, and he invariably hid his eyes from her. But the girl began to notice that the guy secretly looks at her when he thinks that she does not see it, and it was very pleasant and exciting. And one day Andrew suddenly gathered courage. It was on the eve of the site handover. One last chance to get to know each other. Job done. Andrew has nothing more to do at the school, so he'd never see Margaret again. So the boy took a desperate and difficult step. Andrew spoke quietly and simply, no florid phrases. But his speech was so sincere, so touching. Margaret, of course, melted and agreed to go out with the guy. Andrew had no idea that she had been waiting for this invitation for a long time and was beginning to worry that she would never get it. And then what to do? She wouldn't be the one to hang around his neck, would she? Andrew invited Margaret to the cinema. The girl was not worried before the first date. She saw that she liked Andrew very much, felt the warmth emanating from him, and therefore was sure that their meeting would go as it should. If only Andrew would relax a little, because he was very shy. After that first date, Margaret realized that Andrew was completely her person. They were so good, so easy together. Both told each other about their lives and destinies. Andrew was raised by his grandmother. His parents died when the boy was only 6 years old. So there he was left with his paternal grandmother, already a very elderly woman. She was an old-school lady and believed that children should be brought up in strictness, especially boys. So Andrew's childhood could not be called happy, warm, and carefree. No, the boy didn't complain. He just told me how he grew up and grew up. It was Margaret, sensitive and attentive Margaret. She was drawing her own conclusions. She felt sorry for this wonderful boy. She wanted to hug him, to kiss him, to give him some warmth and care. After all this he lacked so much in childhood. Andrew went into the army after high school. Then he came back, trained as a welder. However, he failed to find a job in his profession, but he became a foreman of a repair team. Not an easy job either. Still, the boy never gave up hope of becoming a welder. And wages there are higher, and in general. He'd learned so much for a reason. Andrew lived in a rented flat, just like Margaret. When he was just a kid, some clever relatives had sold his parents' house. There was no end in sight, so the lad had to start from scratch. But he was not discouraged and did not complain about life, although fate treated him rather unfairly. Andrew was very kind and caring, unlike Margaret's previous beau. He always asked if she was hungry, and on chilly evenings he threw his jacket over her shoulders to keep her warm. With Andrew, the girl felt loved and desired. It seemed that he was ready to do anything for her. It was a wonderful feeling. Margaret realized that she was in love. And the feeling was completely mutual. There was no doubt about it. Andrew looked at her with such eyes and tried so hard to make her feel good around him. It was impossible not to notice. Margaret wasn't surprised when Andrew proposed to her and happily accepted. She had long wanted to live next to Andrew in the same flat, to take care of each other, to support each other, and it was more fun together. Margaret was tired of returning to an empty, cold room. Vanessa at first was not delighted with her sister's choice. "You're young, you're pretty, you could easily find someone richer. My Ashley has so many friends. They're all handsome and the sons of rich parents. Are you going to roll around with them like a cheese and butter?" Vanessa asked. "What about Andrew? Never a decent job or prospects." But after getting to know Andrew better, Vanessa changed her mind. "He's a good man," smiled her sister, sharing her impressions with Margaret. "Very kind, and he loves you very much. Everything will be fine with you. You will achieve everything together. You can't miss a man like that. I'm so happy for you. Andrew and Margaret got married. They lived in his rented flat, and Margaret's golden years began. The young husband tried to help his wife in every way. He did a lot of things for her, and even as he had once dreamed, found a new job, got a job as a welder at a construction site. He took part-time jobs, did not refuse the opportunity to earn money, as he was saving for his own flat. Andrew dreamed of buying a 2-bedroom flat in a prestigious neighborhood with many good schools and playgrounds, so that his and Margaret's future children would have a happy childhood. Andrew often made surprises to his young wife. He would give her a ring, or just come home with a bouquet. Margaret felt the happiest in the world and thanked fate for such a loving and caring husband. The young couple spent hours talking about everything in the world, discussing films, stories from the lives of friends or relatives, making plans. Sometimes they argued, but always found a compromise. They liked the same films and books. Both discovered something new and interesting to each other. For example, with Andrew, Margaret became interested in hiking in the woods, and Andrew, thanks to his young wife, fell in love with the theater. Margaret was sure that she and Andrew were soulmates, halves of the same whole. Even though the couple lived poorly, they had enough to live on. Both did not seek excesses like a luxury car or annual trips to the sea. But they were happy to have each other, and often remembered that chance meeting at school, which might not have been. Margaret took a holiday in August, as her bosses had suggested, and then Oliver was born. How happy the young couple had been over his arrival. The new father glowed with pride as he held his son in his arms for the first time. Andrew turned out to be a wonderful parent, attentive, sensitive, caring. He could drive around for hours after work with a pram to give his young wife a rest. But Margaret most often went for a walk with her husband. It was so pleasant to walk together with Andrew, holding the handle of the pram and talking to the man she loved about everything in the world in a low voice, so as not to wake her son. The young parents liked to make plans for the future. They still did not have their own flat, but the amount in the bank account was slowly but surely growing. Just a little more, and the couple would be able to afford to buy their own place. At the same time, Vanessa, Margaret's sister, had a daughter, Ellie. The young mothers often visited each other and learned together the wisdom of caring for babies. The sisters shared advice and discussed the successes and failures of their babies. Margaret felt truly happy, and her husband was so loving and understanding. And her sister was close by. The young couple often dreamed about how their son would grow up. Surely he will be clever, kind, brave, will become, perhaps, a scientist or a craftsman. And they, the parents, will try to ensure that the innate talents of their child to open up and gain strength. It is only necessary to be attentive and patient. Andrew planned to do a lot with his son, to support him, always be there for him. In a difficult moment, Margaret was happy about it. On the soul was easy and calm. The two of them would manage. The child will grow up a good man. But the dreams of the couple were not destined to come true. A few years after the birth of their son, misfortunes one after another fell on their small family. First came the financial crisis, as a result of which the couple's savings depreciated. They were only a short time away from buying their own flat. The goal was so close. But after what had happened, the money accumulated in the account could only buy a couple of winter jackets, and that only if they were very lucky. Oliver had already started kindergarten. Margaret was out of maternity leave. The couple had a hard time getting over what had happened, even crying. Andrew couldn't help crying either. He thought that his wife did not see, but she noticed everything. The man even looked for a flat, the one he had dreamed of for a long time. A spacious two-bedroom apartment not far from a large school and a sports center where Oliver could go swimming. And then it was a blow. But there was no time for despondency. Times were tough. Margaret's salary at the school had been delayed for months. Things were not going well at the building site either. Andrew's main income was now part-time work. The man spent all day long on them to feed his family. As time went on, Oliver grew up and it was time for him to go to first grade. The family seemed to be adjusting to the new conditions. Andrew's part-time job kept them afloat. The man was making plans for his own flat again. There were hopes for a better life, glimmered ahead of a happy future. Then tragedy struck at the construction site. Andrew was moonlighting. The owners of the site were economizing on everything and didn't care much about safety. Andrew knew he was taking a risk, but he was always careful and acted as carefully as possible. But this time, during the construction of a supermarket building, a man fell from the third floor directly onto the concrete blocks piled up below. Of course, Andrew didn't survive. The paramedics who arrived could only pronounce him dead. Margaret wasn't told the terrible news until the morning. For her, the whole world turned upside down and faded away. She could not even cry for a long time. The woman felt her heart and soul literally torn in two. It didn't feel like living. How and why get up in the morning, if there is now no nearest and dearest person? Margaret realized that she would never meet anyone like Andrew again. There was no one else like him. And she didn't need anyone else. She missed his smile, his look, his smell, his warmth. Physically, it was painful from the impossibility to embrace the person she loved. There were his things around: clothes, books, glasses. But Andrew himself would never come home again, hug her and her son, joke with them. How to accept that? To dull the pain, Margaret even took up the bottle. Margaret realized, of course, that this was a dead end. But at that moment, she didn't care, just as long as she could get rid of the unbearable pain for a moment. There was no telling what would have happened to the woman if it hadn't been for Vanessa. She took Oliver in for a while. She had seen that his mother was not only unable to look after the child, but couldn't even manage herself. Margaret didn't care. Oliver was taken away, and that was fine. She didn't even think about her own child's feelings, but he was in pain and scared too. What brought Margaret back to life, oddly enough, was Oliver's illness. He caught pneumonia and ended up in hospital. Vanessa came to her sister in tears to tell her what had happened. She felt guilty. She had not looked after her nephew. He had a high fever and was delirious, Vanessa said. At first, the doctor and I thought it was stress. His father had died and his mother was in a strange state. But then it became obvious it was more serious than that. He was in intensive care for 24 hours. He seems better now. But the doctor says it's too early to relax. Are you drinking? It's time to get my life back. Enough already, we can't bring Andrew back. We're going to lose another boy. The situation brought Margaret back to life. She was scared for her son, more scared than she'd ever been in her life. She pulled herself together, stopped drinking, regained her job, and of course, became a caring and loving mother again. Every day, Margaret now traveled to see her son in hospital. At first, she stood under the windows, and then, when Oliver was allowed to leave, she walked with him for hours in the hospital courtyard. Oliver somehow grew up at once. Trouble had turned the 7-year-old boy into a little old man with sad eyes. He was surprisingly thin, pale, and silent. Looking at her son, Margaret realized that he was under deep stress. Her baby is traumatized and needs a strong mother. And she, Margaret, had given up, drowning in her own grief, forgetting about the person who needed her support. From then on, Margaret became the perfect mother, attentive, fully focused on her son, caring. Margaret could not stay in the city. The rent was too expensive. The woman did not earn so much. She had to return to the village. Her father was gone. His life was taken by a heart attack 2 years earlier. And her mother, the elderly Maggie, was in great need of support and care. It was getting hard for her to manage the household on her own. So Margaret's move came at a good time. Oliver went to first grade at the village school. Margaret took a job as a teacher. But soon she had to think about changing jobs. The salaries at the school were very different from those at the city grammar school. It was impossible to live on such crumbs, and Margaret had to pull the child alone to put him on his feet. A neighbor, Aunt Gray, had a good idea. Her nephew had a shop in the central market. He sold clothes, shoes, accessories. He needed a salesman, someone decent, someone he could trust. His nephew promised Aunt Margaret a good salary, Aunt Nura said. He also offered a percentage of the proceeds. Margaret was also quite happy with the 2x2 schedule. It was hard, of course, to part with her dream job. After all, teaching kids is Margaret's true calling. The woman knew from childhood what she wanted to be. But what can you do when times are so hard? She and Oliver need something to eat. What wouldn't you do for a child? It was with great regret that Margaret left school. She missed her pupils, her colleagues, and her school life for a long time. Her heart sank every time she saw children dressed in uniform on the street. But new realities awaited Margaret. Working in the market was not easy. Capricious customers who didn't know what they wanted. Scandalous traders, competitors, the material responsibilities, and traveling took up a lot of time and energy. On days when Margaret went to work, she had to get up at the crack of dawn and walk almost 2 kilometers to the nearest bus stop in town. But the pay was good. Now Margaret could buy her son beautiful clothes and toys, and even every summer they flew to the seaside resort, and her mother helped to look after her son. She was already very old, of course, but she had enough time and energy for her grandson. Margaret often went to visit Vanessa. She didn't work. She was busy with the house and her daughter. She could afford it. Her husband earned enough to provide for the family. That's how your fate turned out. Vanessa often pitied her sister. You work as hard as you can, spinning as hard as you can. I even feel embarrassed to be a housewife. What about you? Everyone has their own fate, Margaret sighed. I'm not complaining about mine. Oliver and I have everything. There's no need to worry about it. Margaret was genuinely happy about Vanessa's life. She adored both her sister and her niece Ellie, but as her own daughter. The 4 of them often went out together, traveled somewhere together. In general, they lived friendly soul to soul. It was Vanessa who advised Margaret to save up some money and invest it in shares of a large company. Ashley says it's the right thing to do, Vanessa said. We have a lot of money invested in those stocks ourselves. My husband is sure that everything will be great in the end. And Ashley's smart, he knows. Margaret listened to her sister and, without a word to anyone, bought a few shares. The capital was growing, but very slowly. It was impossible to get rich by such interest, as it seemed at first. But Margaret decided to let the money lie on deposit. But she did not tell her son or her mother about the shares. I don't think they'll approve, Margaret thought. They would say it was a waste of money. Let the family live in peace. So Margaret had her own little secret. Now she was saving money, buying shares, saving for a happy future for her son. Oliver grew up to be a smart, athletic boy, unlike his modest, quiet father. He was the soul of the company. He always had a lot of friends, comrades. The guy walked a lot, laughed, socialized. He was a very cheerful and carefree person. What a lad he's grown up to be. Margaret rejoiced. Self-confident, brave, intelligent. Just the kind of son Andrew and I imagined when we walked round the neighborhood with the pram. Oliver dreamed of becoming a lawyer, but to enter the coveted faculty he lacked just a little bit. The guy had to go to the army. Returning, he decided to try his luck in the city. His mother supported her son's decision, and even helped financially by renting Oliver a flat. Go, try, dare, she said. Just be careful, and know that no matter what happens, you can always come home, here, in this house. Thank you, Oliver smiled. But I'm not going back. I'm going to make my way in the city. There are so many opportunities there, so many prospects. Something will come of it. Bon voyage. Margaret smiled. It was scary to let her son go, but what can you do? The boy has grown up. It was time for him to start his own life. Oliver entered a construction college and at the same time got a job at the factory. He studied, worked, and paid his own rent. Often came to the village to visit his mother and grandmother Gwen. He always turned up with gifts and funny stories. Margaret's mother had given up on him. She hardly ever left the house, and sometimes she didn't even recognize her own daughters. One day she had a heart attack. Margaret called an ambulance. Mum was taken to hospital. The old woman never came back. What do you want? Age. The doctor sighed tiredly. Nobody lives forever. Margaret and Vanessa organized a funeral in the village. There were a lot of people at the wake. Everyone knew Mum here, after all. And then Vanessa told her sister to take over her parents' house. I don't want half the inheritance, Vanessa said. I don't need it, you know. What about you? Have you looked after Mum these last few years? It's hard work, so it's only fair that you get the house. Margaret didn't mind. She really needed her own corner. Old age was fast approaching. The woman sometimes marveled at how quickly her life had flown by. It seemed as if she and Andrew had just had Oliver. They were young, full of plans and hopes, beautiful. And now Oliver is a grown-up, independent man. Andrew is gone, and she's almost an old woman herself. What lies ahead? Margaret thought. Only retirement and a quiet, peaceful existence in a country cottage. Oliver is my only hope. He will marry, his grandchildren will be born, the little ones will come to visit their grandmother, and then there will be joy in life. By the way, Oliver is a good man, Margaret thought aloud. He hadn't given up his dream of going to law school. He got in after all. It was hard on him, working and studying, but he'll get through it. I'll be there to help and support him. Vanessa said it was time to live for yourself. You're young, you're still beautiful. Oliver's all grown up. Now you can treat yourself. You've got a good salary, you've got savings. Let's go to Italy or Greece. You've never been abroad before. We'll take a walk there, have a rest. What Greece, what Italy? Margaret smiled back. I have a grown-up son, Oliver, who is getting married soon. I guess I'll have to help him with the wedding and the flat. That's what I'm saving up for. No time for holidays. He's a grown man now, Vanessa persisted. He's so strong and handsome. He'll manage on his own, and you need to think about yourself sometimes. But Margaret didn't agree. It was different for her sister husband Ashley and son Harry were born into a wealthy family. Their futures were planned 100 years in advance and secured. True, Jen's niece, despite her rich parents, had grown up wise, modest, sensible. Simple, natural, pleasant. And independent, too. Like Oliver, Jen worked from an early age. A golden girl. When Margaret had argued with her sister that Oliver would need her support for the foreseeable future, she'd been right. Shortly after that conversation, the son came to visit his mother for the weekend. He was somehow mysterious, not as he always was. Margaret immediately realized that something was wrong. The woman quickly assembled the table, put out her son's favorite treats, fried potatoes with mushrooms, pancakes and pickles from the cellar. Then she watched with pleasure as Oliver devoured it all. At the table, the young man shared some exciting news with his parents. "Mum, I'm getting married," he said. "How are you getting married?" Margaret's questions poured out of Margaret like a cornucopia of questions. To whom? When? The woman was overwhelmed by a storm of emotions: joy, anxiety, surprise. "Her name is Julia," Oliver answered. "You're going to love her. I'll bring her here next weekend. You two should get to know each other before we get married. I just wanted to warn you." At first, Margaret nodded her head with a smile. She knew, of course, that the moment would come sooner or later, but still the news took her by surprise. Wow, Oliver's getting married, all grown up, she thought. Julia worked as a waitress in a cafe, her son said. I often went there for a bite to eat. That's how we met. Julia is also from the country. She was also brought up by a single mother. See how much we have in common. Julia came to the city to go to law school. Another coincidence. That's amazing. She dreamed of working for the law, helping out, catching criminals. And she's so fragile, so thin. What kind of policeman would she be? She failed her college exams, but she didn't want to go back home to the village. Oliver continued. What would she do there? She grew up in a small village in the middle of nowhere, in a poor family. Her mother had 5 younger children besides her. Julia didn't want to go back to her old life. So she took a job as a waitress in a cafe. She got a room in a hostel, so she lived a little, worked a little. How long have you two been together? Margaret asked. 6 months. Almost Oliver smiled. Margaret knew from that smile that her son was in love. She's a good girl, taking care of me. She cleans the house, she cooks. We've been living together for 4 months now, almost in my rented flat. The other day I proposed to her. So that's it, Margaret said. There's so much to prepare. To book a wedding hall, to find outfits for the bride and groom, to hire a presenter, to plan the menu, and to send out invitations. Mom, we've decided we're going to do without all that, Oliver said simply. We'll just do it quietly at the registry office, that's all. As you wish, Margaret nodded. She'd painted a picture in her head of her only son's ideal wedding a long time ago. It was a joyous celebration, with a crowd of dressed-up guests, a ringing toastmaster, a huge cake, and a table bursting with treats. Decorated with balloons and ribbons, cars, dancing. A beautiful bride and a happy groom. But if the young people decided differently, so be it. After all, it's their holiday. The following weekend, Oliver came to his mother's house with the bride. Margaret did her best to prepare a sumptuous table. She made salads and meat. The appetizers on the plates could have made a poem, Margaret thought. She was very anxious to please her future daughter-in-law, to show Julia that she was welcome in the house. The guests were carefully prepared for their arrival. They were careful not to say the wrong thing, so that Oliver would not be ashamed of his mother. Julia was a thin girl of short stature, with large dark eyes, thin eyebrows, and thick fringes. She was dressed simply but tastefully, an elegant dress, low-heeled shoes. At first the guests and the hostess felt a little uneasy. Julia, looking round carefully, was silent. Apparently she was too shy to say a word. Only after a while did Margaret realize that this modesty was feigned. Julia was just looking around, choosing a tactic of behavior, drawing conclusions. The atmosphere at the table was resolved by Oliver. He joked, amused his ladies, threw up interesting topics for conversation. Oliver was always so lively, energetic, companionable. During the conversation, it turned out that Julia was really from a very poor and disadvantaged family. The girl charmed Margaret at the first meeting with her modesty. Oliver's fiancée had a very sweet smile. And how did she look at her fiancé? Her eyes shone with tenderness and love. The boy, however, answered Julia in the same way. He held her hand, now and then hugged her around the waist. There was love and harmony between them. Margaret looked at them and her heart rejoiced. Oliver and Julia were married. Margaret suggested that the young people have a celebration in a cafe. Not a real wedding with a host and decorated cars, but a proper celebration with their friends. She'd even put up the money for it. Margaret had savings. Over the years, the woman had managed to put aside a certain amount. Plus the shares, bought on her sister's advice, had risen in value. At first, Margaret dreamed of buying a flat in the city. But then she realized that she could live quite well in the village. It was quiet, peaceful, and close to familiar and friendly people. Margaret liked the very atmosphere that reigned in her village. Towards retirement, the woman realized that she did not want to move anywhere, even though she had enough money to buy a small flat. Only Vanessa, her sister, knew about the savings. Margaret didn't talk about her wealth, not even to her son. She wanted Oliver to grow up independently, to try to earn his own money for a place to live and achieve something in life. But if he failed, his mother would always help him in a difficult situation. The means are there, but only for the time being. He wasn't supposed to know about it, to make his own way. The money was in a bank account. Margaret had invested some of it in shares a few years ago on the advice of her husband and sister, and the money was now earning a good income. And for her son's wedding, Margaret had withdrawn a sum that she estimated would be enough for a sumptuous celebration. Margaret wanted to give the young couple a gift. On her son's next visit, she handed Oliver a puffy envelope. Wow, he marveled as he looked inside. What a surprise. Where did you get it? I saved up, Margaret smiled. Make a holiday of it all you want. Go to a restaurant with your friends. Don't deny yourself anything. Have fun. Thank you, Oliver smiled. We'd better save that money for the flat. Why rent? You both make enough money, and a wedding is only once in a lifetime. Well, ideally, of course. I'm having trouble with my job, Oliver admitted. It's not paying much, and it's unstable out there. I could be out of the hospital. What about Julia? Doesn't she make enough money? They don't pay a waitress $1 million. It's all right, Margaret said, patting her grown-up son on the shoulder. He's all grown up, Oliver, and he's a big man himself. And his problems are just as grown-up financial matters, family maintenance. I feel sorry for him, of course, but we all go through it. Don't worry, son. You'll finish your studies and find a better job. You're my good boy. You're so smart, handsome, and educated. Everywhere with open arms will be accepted with open arms. Oliver sighed heavily. I was expelled. How? Margaret gasped. Why? For truancy? Oliver said quietly. I had to work a lot, so I didn't get to class. I had a lot of absences. I thought I'd make it, but I couldn't. So I got expelled. That's all right, Margaret said, pulling herself together. Oliver needed support now. It wasn't the first or the last to recover and finish his studies. I don't want to finish my studies. Oliver snapped at her. I'm a grown man. I'm just sitting in the classroom, wiping my trousers. It's funny. You have to earn money, not suffer with nonsense. Margaret didn't argue with her son. He was not in the right state to realize anything, and then she would change his mind. Education is necessary for a young man, otherwise you can't build a career. The woman will definitely convey this to her adult and only child. Now you need to support him, calm him down, encourage him. Well, if you don't want a wedding, you can do what you like with that money, Margaret nodded to Oliver. Thank you, Mama. Oliver smiled happily. The money will be very useful to us now. I'm glad to help. You're all grown up and practical. Other people would be happy to spend money on a holiday, but you're thinking about the future. I have to. Oliver sighed. Her son left and Margaret stayed at home with a troubled heart. She was worried about Oliver. He hadn't finished his studies. He didn't have a proper job. He didn't have a place to live. Now he was getting married. If the children came, Oliver would have to work at unskilled labor from morning till night to provide for his family. This was not the future Margaret had dreamed of for her only child. He's a grown man. He'll sort it out, her sister Vanessa reassured her over the phone that evening. What are you worried about? You've done everything you had to do. It's up to him now. Shouldn't we give him money for a flat? Margaret consulted Vanessa. It'd be easier on the young people. At least they wouldn't have to pay rent. Let him pay, objected her elder sister. Don't even think of mentioning that money now. They'll sit on their necks and shrink from it. But they will try to get out of the situation. Maybe they'll succeed. And you can always give them the flat as a present. It's not time yet. You're right, Vanessa, you're right, Margaret agreed. Of course, said her sister, grinning. Come and visit me. Come tomorrow, we'll go to a film, sit in a cafe. You need to unwind. You're right again, Margaret smiled. I'm so lucky to have a sister like that, someone close to me who's always there to cheer me up. Oliver and Julia were married. The wedding took place in the city registry office in a modest and quiet manner. Margaret, Vanessa, and Ellie and Julia's 2 girlfriends attended the ceremony. Afterwards, a small group of people had a modest celebration in a cafe. They sat for a short time, made a few toasts to the newlyweds, presented them with gifts, and left. Julia had to go to her shift, and Oliver was waiting for her at work. What a wedding, Margaret said disappointedly when she and her sister were alone. The women decided to do a little shopping. Oh, come on, Vanessa said nonchalantly. Young people don't care about anything these days. as long as they lived well. Did Oliver and Julia have a good life? Margaret had no idea. Her son tried not to talk to his mother about it, and she didn't feel comfortable asking, prying into a grown man's soul. The young people came to visit occasionally. Julia behaved politely, but coldly and aloofly. Margaret noted that there seemed to be a good relationship between the young couple. Oliver's work was not going well. He changed places and employers, looking for a decent income, but nothing worked. Oliver didn't want to think about going back to university. Margaret was tempted several times to tell her son that she had a financial safety cushion, which she was ready to give him. She wanted to support Oliver, to take the despair out of his eyes. But the woman held back. We need to let the young ones try to get back on their feet on their own. It's important. It's not like they're so needy right now. Yes, it's hard, but they're two adults who should be able to cope. But if there's a baby, then it's a different matter. Children should live in normal conditions, with calm, peaceful parents. It's been a few years. The situation in the son's family did not change. He was still looking for a job. Oliver went from being a jolly joker Balaguer to a scowling man. Margaret thought it was because of money problems. But one day she happened to witness a conversation between her son and Julia. The couple had come to visit Margaret. It had been happening less and less lately. The woman went into the kitchen to take a goose roasted with apples out of the oven. When she returned with the tray in her hands, she witnessed an ugly scene. "You're nothing but a worthless man." Julia looked at Oliver with dislike. "You can't do anything. Rachel married Andrew. He got her a cool phone for her birthday, and they're going on holiday to the Emirates soon. And you can't even afford a spa day for the woman you love. What about a spa? We're about to be evicted from our flat for non-payment." Oliver lowered his head in silence. He had nothing to say. The young man must have felt really worthless at that moment. Margaret's heart clenched with pity for her son. Wow. Did Julia often humiliate him in this way if she couldn't help it when she visited him? And Oliver hung his head too habitually. He was not even surprised, nor did he try to defend himself. And Julia, it turned out, was a real piece of work. She pretended to be modest at first. It cost Margaret a great deal of labor to pull herself together. One must not show one's true attitude to the situation. In fact, she must pretend that she had neither seen nor heard anything. Her interference would only spoil everything. Julia will have the opportunity to call Oliver a mama's boy, and she'd have a hard time with her mother-in-law, that's for sure. No, let them sort it out themselves, they're adults. For the rest of the evening, until the young people left, Margaret kept neutral, talking on distracted subjects, smiling at both spouses, and trying not to notice the fixed sadness in her son's eyes. When the children left, it was obvious to Margaret. Oliver is madly in love with Julia. And it is immediately clear he is ready to turn mountains for her sake. He tries, he fights, but he fails. Largely because Oliver never finished school. And he didn't finish his studies because of Julia. He had to work hard to satisfy the demands of his beloved. Margaret twitched herself. She had to be objective. After all, it had been Oliver's choice to drop out of university and get a job. Yes, in many ways it had come out of a desire to please Julia. But it was Oliver's own decision. How can I help my son now? Margaret thought again about the money in the account. Maybe we should give it to Oliver. Let him buy a flat. It would make Julia feel better. Margaret was accustomed to consult her sister Vanessa on serious matters, so she rang her sister. "You're mad," Vanessa exclaimed when she heard her sister's reasoning. "Don't buy Oliver a flat now. Don't you realize that it would be considered marital property? They've only been together a little over a year. What if there's a divorce? Julia would take half of it without blinking an eye. I understand if they had kids. Then at least the grandkids would get everything. But as it is, there's no telling who's going to get it." Margaret realized her sister was right again. There's so much to consider, it's hard to keep in one's head. It's not easy being a mother to a grown-up son, Margaret sighed. It's not easy being a mother at all, but sometimes it's nice, her sister countered. A few more years passed. Margaret could see that her son was unhappily married. Oliver was still looking for a decent living. He did everything he could. He worked as a shift worker, tried to start a business, and worked as a trucker, but he didn't stay anywhere for long. Then the company went bankrupt. Then the next medical examination did not pass. Finally, Oliver gave up, tired of being disappointed. One day he arrived at his mother's house suddenly, unannounced, alone. "We can't afford to live in Seattle," he sighed. "It's too expensive for us. We're going back to Claremont. We'll live with you for a while. Do you mind?" Margaret shook her head in surprise. Good, Oliver nodded. "In that case, we'll come back next week." Margaret was at a loss for words after her son's departure. Are they going to live together here in the village? What kind of a strange decision is that? There's not even much work here. What do Oliver and Julia expect? But Margaret did not argue with her son. She could see he was having a hard enough time as it was. All right, let them try. They're probably just looking for a way out of a difficult situation. They're considering a life in the country. Well, we can do that. The city didn't work out. Life together with Oliver and Julia began with a turf war. "Mom, we're going to live in the living room," said Oliver. "Why?" Margaret was surprised. She had prepared a corner bedroom for the young couple. She thought it was the coziest and most remote room, and would be more comfortable for the young people. "Because it's the biggest and brightest room," Oliver replied simply. Margaret realized later that her son was broadcasting Julia's will. He was always trying to please his wife. He loved his young wife more than his life. And she took advantage of that. Julia immediately showed her true face to her mother-in-law, not even trying to pretend to be polite or modest. She didn't like everything Margaret did. Her mother-in-law didn't cook properly, too fatty, unhealthy food. She didn't know how to set a table. And she didn't even scrub the floors properly. Julia often made contemptuous remarks to Margaret. "Why do you rattle your dishes in the morning and disturb your sleep? Or do your friends laugh too loudly? And anyway, can't you get together somewhere else in the evening now?" At first, Margaret was at a loss for words at her sister-in-law's insolence. But then, of course, she thought of appropriate responses to Julia's barbs. She wanted to remind the young woman that she was not in her own house and that she should behave more modestly. But Margaret refrained for her son's sake. She saw how much he was attached to Julia, loved and worshipped her. The young husband tried to fulfill every whim of his wife. There were many whims. Oliver did not cope and felt guilty. Julia fueled this guilt in him. She often mentioned the husbands and boyfriends of her acquaintances, who lavished jewelry on their loved ones and literally showered them with money. Margaret understood the purpose of all this talk. Julia manipulated Oliver, played on his feelings, used her spouse, suppressed. But she wasn't even trying to open her son's eyes. He wasn't in the right state of mind now anyway, too blinded by love and passion. Margaret sincerely did not understand what her son found in this Julia. Well, yes, she was pretty, but there's a lot of them out there, and yet such strong feelings. It seemed that if Julia asked him to jump off a cliff, he'd do it gladly. Oliver got a job at the local sawmill. It was hard work, physically exhausting, but the pay was good, enough to periodically take Julia to the city, then to shopping, then to a restaurant. The young wife herself did not bother to work. "Well, where can I find a suitable place here in the village?" She sighed. "And in the city every day?" Margaret, "Go to the city." "All of them." "I used to go," Margaret suddenly remembered. "I had no husband, and I had a baby to raise. I had to get from here to the Central Market every day." "Why are you comparing different times and situations?" Julia sighed languidly. "Firstly, I'm married. Fortunately, the responsibility for the financial maintenance of the family lies with the man, not the woman. Secondly, we are not in a hurry to have children. I believe that to give birth without a home, without a yard, terribly irresponsible. And thirdly, I'm going through such a period now. Do you think it's easy to work as a waitress on night shifts, to go out, to put up with the antics of customers? I need to recuperate, get my head round it." Margaret had a lot to say to her daughter-in-law, but she kept quiet for her son's sake. He was having a hard enough time as it was, and now he would be flitting between mother and wife, like between two fires. Margaret realized that her daughter-in-law was openly condemning her life. Julia thought it was irresponsible to have children without a home, without a yard. It's a reproach to her, isn't it? When she and Andrew had Oliver, the young family had no home of their own. That's what her daughter-in-law was implying. The longer the young people lived at Margaret's, the clearer the woman realized that Julia was manipulating Oliver, making him dance to her tune. She uses her spouse, her son, the one who is in love with the young beauty to the point of losing his mind. The wife turns the situation in her favor. Julia herself clearly does not have any tender feelings for her husband. This is evident from her irritation, from the unpleasant looks at the spouse, from the words, gestures. There's a lot of signs of that, and how only the son does not notice. So why is Julia still with Oliver? The answer is simple: who else would go to such lengths for her? Where else would she find someone so loyal and obedient? A feeling like Oliver's for Julia is rare, and the girl realizes that. She will try to squeeze the maximum out of the situation, and if there is a better option, she will easily leave Oliver. Being confident in her own attractiveness, Julia behaved rudely with her mother-in-law right in front of Oliver. She must have realized that Margaret could see right through her. It made her angry, annoyed, and frightened, apparently. And how did Julia look at her mother-in-law? She felt superfluous in her own home: the arrogant, contemptuous glance, the barbed remarks, the reproaches. In order to have less contact with her sister-in-law, Margaret herself now went to visit neighbors, and also often went to her sister Vanessa and even stayed overnight at her place. Vanessa, of course, advised her to put Julia in her place. "This is your house," her sister shook her head. Remind her of that. Make her think about it. Tell her to separate, to look for a place to live, because she's living on her own and she's being insolent. "Well, do you want me to talk to her myself if you're uncomfortable?" No, Margaret waved her hands. No way. Oliver is always on her side in everything. He was already having a hard enough time as it was, and he didn't want to add to it. Oliver really believed everything his wife said. Margaret tried to behave as politely as possible, kept silent in response to her daughter-in-law's barbed remarks, cleaned her plates without complaint, and put up with her reproaches. But Julia, apparently, still complained to her husband about his mother, put it in an unpleasant light. "Mum, why are you picking on her?" Sometimes the son would start a conversation. "Julia is a wonderful woman. I love her. You mustn't think of her as an enemy. Try to make it up to her." "I never quarreled with her," Margaret tried to justify herself. "I try not to talk to her at all. She turns every conversation to her own side. She makes me her number one enemy. That's what it's all about." "It's sad," Oliver shook his head. "That's what Julia says. You either blame her, ignore her, or make her work in the kitchen. You can't have it both ways. Why do you make her clean up after herself? Julia's been going through a rough patch. She needs a break." "I was just reminding her to put her plate away. No one's making her work." "I'm serving you." Oliver looked at her mother with a sad look, and Margaret realized it was useless. He wouldn't believe that his wonderful Julia was systematically turning her husband and mother-in-law's life into a nightmare. Maybe it will come to Oliver at some point, but certainly not now. Julia masterfully pitted Oliver against his own mother, the person who sheltered the couple in her home, gave them shelter, who essentially feeds them. Oliver earned a pittance at the sawmill, and the lion's share of his salary went to pay off his loans. In the city, the couple had accumulated loans, for which they now had to pay. It was hurtful and painful. Margaret saw no way out of the situation. She could only hope that sooner or later Oliver would see the light. Sometimes she wanted to throw the insolent youth out of the house, but that would mean losing her son forever. Julia had a way of turning Oliver against his mother over nothing. And if she threw them out of the house at a difficult moment, there'd be drama to be played out. Shakespeare would be jealous, and the house, to be fair, it was Oliver's. When Margaret's mother died, she suddenly realized that these things usually happen suddenly. Yes, Mum had been ill, in need of help, but there was nothing to suggest that she'd passed away suddenly. Margaret thought about it a lot. After all, she might one day be gone just as suddenly. And then what would happen to Oliver? The inheritance, waiting 6 months. What if there's another bidder for the house? Unexpected heirs. My father had a complicated relationship with his relatives. Anything's possible. To protect Oliver, Margaret, who was the only owner of the house at the time, wrote a gift deed to her son. And that was it. Her soul was at rest. Margaret was used to living for her only child. She did everything for him. The house was now officially Oliver's, and his son knew it. The truth was, Oliver didn't think he'd need the inheritance. He planned to settle down in the city, buy a nice flat. What was he going to do with a country house? Who knew it would turn out like this? Margaret decided to be patient. It cost her a lot of effort to hold on and not to take it out on Julia. And it was not a healthy life for her. But for the sake of her son, she could bear it. As long as Oliver was happy. If it hadn't been for Vanessa and her sensible advice, Margaret would have spent all of her savings on a flat in the city for young people. But her sister had been right. The woman realized that now more than ever. Julia doesn't love Oliver. That much is obvious. She's using him. And if Oliver buys a flat that would be considered jointly acquired property, the young wife will immediately demand a divorce. She'll legally take half of it with her into her new life. And that's a lot of good money. No, she won't, Julia. Oliver can't go on blinded by this strange love forever. He'll see the light one day. That's when he'll need a flat in the city for his new life. It's just a pity Oliver can't be kicked out of the house. Margaret had to endure the antics and unjust reproaches of her daughter-in-law. There was no end to it. But the woman realized that now she was unable to change anything. Vanessa, seeing her sister's distress, suggested that they go on holiday together. Why, to get away? She urged Margaret over the phone. We'll sunbathe on the sea, we'll swim, we'll go on excursions. It'll be great, agree. Margaret eventually gave in. She really needed a break from everything that was going on at home. Let the young people live in the village house by themselves. Julia would have to cook and clean. They're so spoiled they won't even wash a plate. She sits at home all day watching soap operas on her phone. Julia, of course, expressed her displeasure about Margaret's holiday. There's no money in the family. And some people go to resorts, she replied to Oliver's remark that his salary had been cut again. But then even the man who had angelic patience and was in love with his wife couldn't stand it. Julia, what do you care? Mum earned it. She's entitled to it. Yes, and what about my holiday? We've never been anywhere with you before. And we'll earn it, I promise. Margaret disappeared into her room without saying anything. She had no time to get into an argument with her sister-in-law. Things wouldn't pack themselves. It had been a marvelous trip. Margaret and Vanessa rented a cottage in a small village on the Black Sea. The sisters walked a lot, swam in the warm waves, sunbathed, went on a variety of excursions. Margaret once took a risk and realized an old dream, took a ride on a jet ski with a young and reckless driver. Splashing in the face, dizzying speed, endless sea surface. Margaret had never had so much fun and fear at the same time. What about the sea, excursions? The sisters even went to discos at night and danced like in their youth. Don't despair. Thank you, Vanessa, for pulling me out. Margaret was genuinely pleased. It felt like 10 years younger. By the way, that's exactly what it looks like, Vanessa smiled. You look better, more rested. You look wonderful. And so it was. For the first time in years, Margaret liked herself. She looked fresher in the mirror, and most importantly, there was a sparkle in her eyes and life and energy in her face. Margaret felt that she had left behind all her problems, her capricious, demanding daughter-in-law, her unsettled son, her endless quarrels in the kitchen. There was a powerful reset. The woman felt strong, beautiful, and energetic. The world seemed bright and friendly. Only good things were thought of. One day the sisters stayed up late, admiring unusually large stars and bright yellow moon, which left a clear path on the sea surface. It was beautiful, Margaret said. It sure is. Vanessa agreed. It's a pity we have to go back tomorrow. I can't believe it. I like it so much here, another life, another world. And there it's all the same again. They're chasing them away. Vanessa couldn't take it anymore. They're sitting on your neck and being rude. When she waits for me, I'll come to you and put things in order. Don't. Margaret protested. It would make things worse. It won't make things worse, Vanessa grumbled. It can't get any worse than this. Good evening, fair ladies. A low, pleasant voice came from somewhere behind them. Both women flinched in surprise and turned round. In front of them stood a man, slim, trim, with elegant gray hair on his temples. He smiled charmingly and very friendly. He was wearing jeans rolled up to his knees and a loose black t-shirt. In all this, the stranger looked very stylish and attractive. "Hello to you, too," Vanessa answered for the two of them. "It's a lovely evening, isn't it?" The man kept coming closer and closer. Margaret couldn't take her eyes off his smile. It made the stranger's face glow from within. The man introduced himself as Harry, said he had just arrived here today and checked into a room on the first floor of the cafe. The sisters were just there tonight having dinner at the place, drinking wine, eating kebab, enjoying live music. Harry immediately noticed two beautiful single ladies at the table and purposely followed them to the shore. "I'm sorry if I startled you," he said. "And don't think I'm a frivolous adventurer. It's just that you both have such kind smiles. I wanted to get to know you better. I'm here all by myself. I'd like to find some company for walking and socializing if you don't mind." "There's a problem with that," Vanessa shrugged her shoulders guiltily. "We're leaving tomorrow at lunchtime, the plane." "That's a shame." The smile slipped off Harry's face for a moment. Margaret, too, was sorry that they wouldn't get to know the man better. Surely it would have been even more fun and interesting for the three of them to spend the holiday together. There was something about Harry, something special. Margaret wanted to be near him, to look into his eyes, to admire the man's smile, to listen to him. Strange. The woman didn't remember anything like that happening to her in the last 30 years. And had it ever happened in her life at all? "Well, if that's the case, we have one night left," Harry smiled again. "Let's make it fun, something to remember. I come here a lot. I'll show you such places. I'll show you places like this. Are you coming with me?" Margaret was ready to say yes immediately. But Vanessa, cautious Vanessa, unlike her sister, did not lose her head around the charming stranger. "We're kind of seeing you for the first time," she said with an embarrassed smile. "I do not want to offend you, but still." Harry slapped himself on the forehead. Of course. There are all sorts of freaks and criminals out there now. Of course you're afraid I'm like that, aren't you? Let's just walk along the seafront then. There are lots of people here. I don't want to leave you." "We can do that," Vanessa said cheerfully. Margaret could see that her sister was glad that Harry wasn't offended. It was a wonderful walk. The sisters and their new acquaintance chatted and laughed non-stop. It turned out that Harry lives in New York. He has his own business there, a chain of shops in California. He is often there on business, meeting with winemakers, signing contracts, making purchases, in general, developing the business. Harry also told about his personal life simply, without secrecy. He acted as if he had known Vanessa and Margaret for 100 years. "I was widowed early," he said. "My daughter was only 9 at the time. I never remarried because my daughter didn't want a stepmother in the house. And the word of an only child has always been law to Harry." "You and Margaret are alike in that," Vanessa said. "She lives only with her son too, and she puts up with a lot for his sake, allows him everything." Yes, Harry looked at Margaret with interest and met her eyes. The woman's eyes flashed like they had when she was young. She even felt hot. "That's a waste," Harry continued. "Years later, I realized it wasn't right. My daughter grew up to be a spoilt brat, but she's doing well now. She's found a husband who tolerates her whims as well as I do, and they live peacefully. Abroad, unfortunately. They've gone to a warm place. So I'm all alone. I have a job, friends. But still, after my daughter's departure, the house and my soul feel empty." The Trinity partied till the morning. It felt like they were back in their youth. Harry was clearly sympathetic to Margaret. He tried to make her like him. From time to time he took her hand as if by accident. And once he gave her a gentle, brief hug around the waist. But Margaret wanted that moment to last forever. The sisters didn't get to their cottage until it was starting to get light. Harry, of course, volunteered to escort them. "I hate to leave you," he said, looking at Margaret. "Margaret, do you two want to exchange phone numbers?" Vanessa suggested. "What if we had such a good time? Maybe we could come back again next year. We should call each other so we can have a holiday together." "That'd be great." "That's a great idea," Harry said, dictating his number. "No, "Give me your phone number," Harry suggested. Margaret complied with his request with a smile. He deliberately held her hand in his as he took her mobile phone. There was so much warmth from him, so much tenderness. Margaret wanted to dissolve into it all. It was a shame they had met so late. Harry quickly dialed Margaret's number from his phone. There he smiled. "Now that we've exchanged numbers, we won't lose each other. That's great." Margaret nodded. She realized that this phone exchange meant nothing, and the fairy tale that had almost begun would never really begin, because there was no tomorrow. Tonight she and Vanessa would fly home, and there would be a cramped village house, a disgruntled daughter-in-law, a disengaged son. And the problems hadn't gone anywhere while she'd been away. Harry, Margaret thought. "Well, Harry, today he walked with us. Tomorrow he'll find someone else. Such a man, he's not for me. He's too handsome, too successful, too wonderful. I can't have a man like that." It's sad, of course, but it's the truth of life. "And how did he look at you?" Vanessa smiled when the sisters were alone. "I wish someone would look at me with admiration someday. Just once." "Come on," Margaret said with a smile. She knew she would think of Harry often now, his soft voice, his delightful manners, his beautiful eyes. And let that man forget about her the very next day. It would make no difference. Margaret did not reach her home until evening. She and Vanessa had had a couple of hours' nap before the flight. But still Margaret felt tired and broken after the sleepless night, the flight, and the acclimatization. The gate was unlocked. Oliver must have forgotten to lock the gate when he got home from work. "Oh, he's been tired lately," Margaret thought. "And then Julia doesn't know what she's been feeding her husband while I've been away." It was hard to imagine Julia cooking borscht for her husband. The windows of the house were wide open. From inside, the television was blaring the evening news. Margaret was about to enter the house with a smile when she heard Julia's voice. She was obviously in the kitchen. How? She was reprimanding someone, obviously Oliver. "Very simple. She'll be here in a minute. So what? We won't send her to Maggie's for milk. And while she's walking around, we'll put her stuff outside. It's a piece of cake." "It's been agreed 100 times," Julia argued. "What are you worried about?" "Isn't that too harsh?" Oliver asked in an uncertain voice. "She's my mother after all, and this is her house." "It's not hers. It's yours," Julia argued. "You showed me the deed of gift. If that's the case, why should I put up with her here? I mean, she's been bugging me about this and that. Oliver, I told you she's trying to break us up. But then I'll leave. Because I can't live in a house with my mother." Okay, Oliver mumbled conciliatorily. "We'll proceed as we agreed. Just don't let it get to you. We're doing the right thing, standing up for our personal boundaries. We're doing good." Margaret stood under the window, dead or alive. The meaning of the conversation she'd just overheard slowly dawned on her. They were going to kick her out of the house, and Oliver had agreed to that. This was something the older woman had never expected. Her eyes flickered darkly. Her blood pressure must have spiked. Margaret took a few deep breaths to get herself under control, let the joyful look pass, and entered the native hay. "Oh, hello," said Julia, smiling lusciously. "And we were expecting you a little later." "I was in a taxi," Margaret replied. "I didn't have time to look round, and that's why." "Julia, I've brought you some presents," she continued. "Oh, what a lot of impressions. I'll share them. I'll tell you about them." Julia pretended to be happy to see him. Oliver stood by her side, slumped and silent. Margaret understood the reason for her son's sadness. Of course he was having a hard time, but he could not put his wife in her place. She has too much influence over him. "Oh, Margaret," said Julia, "will you go to Maggie's and get some fresh milk, please? I've got soup boiling on the cooker." "I can't get away. Oliver's very tired from work and he's ill." "If you're not too tired, of course." Margaret nodded and left the house, already knowing what awaited her on her return. It was good that she had listened to this conversation. At least she would have time to prepare for a serious conversation with her son and his wife. Margaret noticed her suitcases on the porch from a distance. They stood orphaned, leaning against the wall, waiting for their hostess. The hope that Oliver would stop the brazen wife had vanished like smoke. The woman went up to the porch and knocked on the door. "There's a note." Julia's voice came from inside. "Read it, and you'll understand. Goodbye." "I don't want your note," said Margaret. "I want to talk to you, to look you in the eye." "Oh, eyes." The door swung open with a clatter. Julia stood on the threshold. She looked haughtily at Margaret. "Well, will you look, if that's what you want?" "Julia, why have you done this to me?" Margaret asked. "I've tried to be your friend, hadn't I?" "You're annoying me," the young woman shared. "You look judgmental. Everything is wrong. Everything is wrong for you. You make your own rules. I don't feel like I own the place, and Oliver's being nice to you." "But this is my house," Margaret reminded me gently. "So it's only natural that I should have my own ways." "There you go again," Julia exclaimed. "Are you insinuating that we live here again? It's not your house, by the way. It's not yours, it's your son's. So you're the one living here. Then get out of here. Your pension is good. Enough for a rented place." "Thank you for packing my things," Margaret said calmly. And it took a lot of effort for Margaret to keep calm. She would indeed cry bitterly when she got to Vanessa. Of course she would go to her sister. Who else would she go to? Except she doesn't have much stuff. "My things are just clothes," Margaret sighed heavily. "Where are the photo albums, the old books, the letters?" "And this rubbish?" Julia grinned. "We threw it away." "How?" Margaret gasped. She felt as if she'd been punched in the solar plexus. "It was my family history. Old photographs, letters from Andrew and my parents, postcards, diaries Vanessa and I kept when we were young. Ellie and Oliver's first drawings. All of it carefully stored in boxes and folders, neatly arranged on the shelves of a rack in my bedroom. Was there nothing left?" Julia looked at her mother-in-law defiantly. "What's with the habit of clinging to rubbish?" Grinned the insolent girl. "What's the use of these dusty papers? It's even easier to breathe without them." Margaret, in spite of her condition, suddenly had a marvelous idea. The woman even had to suppress a smile so as not to accidentally give herself away. Julia. She would soon stop feeling like the mistress of the situation. In a couple of minutes, the smug expression will evaporate from her pretty face, Margaret thought. "So you've thrown everything out of my room?" she asked. "Absolutely," Julia replied. "It's going to be our dressing room now. All the boxes, every single one of them. Have you even looked inside? Some we looked at, some we threw away." "Why?" Julia was suddenly tense. Were there documents or what? "Dots can be recovered in a pinch," Margaret said, sinking tiredly onto the porch steps. "Was the blue shoebox thrown away too?" "Yeah, I guess so. What's the big deal?" Because Margaret looked up at Julia, it was my savings, the money for the flat I was going to give Oliver. The words had an incredible effect. Julia was stunned, pale. She opened and closed her mouth a couple of times, trying to say something. Then she sank helplessly to the steps beside Margaret. "Why didn't you tell me?" she almost whispered. Margaret was pleased with the effect of the phrase. She did not keep any money in any blue shoebox. It was just sitting there in the account, slowly building up. But Julia needed to be taught a lesson for all the bad things she'd done to her and Oliver. "How did I know you'd decide to throw my things out of the house?" Margaret said, stubbornly playing the part of a confused, bewildered old woman. "I never imagined such a thing." Julia shook her head as if she had woken from a dream. Her eyes lit up with eagerness for action. "You will tell me everything in detail," she asked. "What did the box look like? What shade of blue was it? Was it large or small?" Margaret answered, trying not to confuse her statements, lest the situation get out of hand. Oliver had stayed home the whole time. Didn't even stick his nose out on the porch. He was probably ashamed that he'd gone along with his wife and kicked his mother out of the house. But he couldn't turn against his wife either. He loved her too much, which Julia took advantage of. Having answered all Julia's questions, Margaret headed for the bus stop. "Come on," Stay, her daughter-in-law said. She needed her mother-in-law now to help her in her search. The young woman was determined to find the box, even in a landfill, even at the end of the world, and Margaret could help her. She knew what the receptacle of a large sum of money looked like. Why should she? Margaret was a little surprised. How so? Why should we look for the box of money together? You do care about your savings, don't you? That's what it is. Margaret smiled. That's where you're wrong. I don't care what happens to that money. I was going to give it to you anyway. If you find it, take it. Margaret walked down her home street and felt Julia's eyes on her. Her sister-in-law was shocked that she had thrown away so much money with her own hands. Yes, but now Julia would dig her nose into the ground to bring that wealth home. Greedy Julia doesn't realize Margaret's money is in a bank account. Her mother-in-law is not so inexperienced as to keep such funds in a box. Before heading to the bus stop, Margaret stopped by to see Jen, a neighbor. She had once been friends with her mother Maggie, a firm friendship, but now Maggie was sadly no longer alive. Margaret still had a good relationship with Jen, though. She needed someone in the village, someone to tell her what was going on, to keep an eye on Julia. And Jen was the perfect person to be that informant. The woman had been exasperated at first, listening to Margaret's story. She couldn't understand how it was possible to do that to a man who let his daughter-in-law and son into the house when they were in a difficult situation. And then, having learnt the full story, Jen laughed loudly and merrily. "Oh, Aunt Margaret, you've got to be kidding. You should have rubbed her nose in it like that. You've got that right, haven't you?" "I'd like to know how they're doing," Margaret smiled. "How are they living? How's the search going? Something tells me this story will open Oliver's eyes to his wife." "That's too bad," Jen shook her head. "I didn't think he'd be so weak-willed." "Love is evil," Margaret sighed. Jen had hit a sore spot in her heart. "Of course I've been looking after them, and I've kept my son involved. Do you know how quick he is? Peckinpah." Jen's son had just turned 14. He's been using his phone to film content for his channel. And once again, he's got a few things to go on. When Margaret was done with her chores, she went to see her sister Vanessa. She would not abandon her, would listen to her, support her, pity her. It was good to have such a person. A fortnight had passed since the evening of Margaret's return from the resort. It was a short time, but a lot had happened in that time. Firstly, Margaret's plan had worked. Julia was hooked. She found out where the rubbish from their village was taken, found the dump, and now she traveled there every day as if it were her job. Thankfully, the girl didn't work anywhere and had plenty of free time. Julia's trips to the dump were regularly reported to Margaret by phone by Jen. She proved to be an excellent liaison. "Oh, Aunt Margaret, what a circus. She goes to the bus stop first thing in the morning like a bayonet. She's like a tourist. She's got a huge rucksack on her shoulders, overalls, gloves, bags. Everything is serious. And in the evening she comes back tired, upset, angry. She smells like a motherfucker. Animals scatter. People cringe. What a circus." The stories of Julia's hikes were not the only ones. Peckin, Jen's son, sometimes followed Julia, traveling with the boys to the dumps and filming videos of the young woman's persistent digging through mountains of rubbish. Margaret watched these videos on Peckin's channel. Julia scrupulously, day after day, combed through the dump, not missing a single square meter. It looked comical, of course. But Margaret was already feeling a little sorry for her sister-in-law, almost ex-sister-in-law. Oliver had filed for divorce. First, Margaret had heard from the neighbors that Oliver had left home. Then the son called his mother, apologized, repented, and told her he was divorcing Julia. "She had turned me away with her obsession with money, her boorishness, her greed. We're splitting up, Mum. I can't go on with her. She must be crazy. Julia can stay at our house for a while. I've given her a week because she has nowhere to go. Julia keeps hoping to find money. It's become an obsession for her. She blames herself for not looking in the boxes you threw out, and she's eating herself up. She blames me too. It's unbearable. What about you? What are you going to do in town?" "I found a job, a good job at last, with accommodation, which is important. I'll have to go on business trips, but what's in it for me? But the money's good." Margaret felt better after talking to her son. It was so important to be in touch with the person she loved. There was no more conflict or misunderstanding between her and Oliver. Oliver's life seemed to be getting better. He's found a job, he's getting away from Julia, who was openly using him. Maybe he'll meet a nice girl soon and be happy in his personal life again. What are his years? The relationship with Julia is clearly a lesson to Oliver. He won't fall into that kind of net again. At least Margaret hoped so. The nicest thing that had happened in Margaret's life was the day after she'd arrived at her sister's house. Vanessa, of course, had taken her in. They had a spare room in their flat. "Live as long as you like, sis," she hugged Margaret. "I'd be glad if you moved in for good." Margaret went to bed upset. She had no idea how she was going to live her life. In the morning, she received a phone call from Harry, the same casual acquaintance who had charmed the woman at the resort. He said he couldn't forget their meeting, that he thought of Margaret all the time, dreamed of seeing her again. It was incredible. Harry. Margaret had never thought that such a man would actually fall in love with her, but it seemed that he had. Harry called and wrote often. They chatted a lot, and gradually, somehow, they became closer to each other. At a distance, yes, but still Margaret felt that they both needed this companionship. Harry expressed a desire to come to Margaret, but she suggested another option, a more pleasant one. Margaret would fly to him herself, because, well, the atmosphere of a resort and a dusty old country town were, as they say, two big differences. The money Margaret had for the trip was the very money she had once saved for her son's flat. Oliver earns his own money, but she, Margaret, has only one life, and she should enjoy every moment of it. The woman realized this in her retirement, but better late than never. In general, Margaret was going on a long journey, went shopping with Vanessa, bought beautiful things, and felt really happy. She had one more unpleasant but urgent thing to do before she left. A conversation with Julia. She's had enough of being a loser, Margaret thought. Let her start a new life too.